partners to a much larger degree than we are presently doing. I want to use this platform to share the work that is happening with our group at Aditya Birla Group, and the level of partnerships that we're doing, and the importance that we currently that we give to the fact that science and technology will key for the next level growth of our group. Aditya Birla Group have a central science and technology center. We call it Aditya Birla Science and Technology Company, ABSTC. We have an overall, the objective of setting up this separate company, ABSTC, was to do ideation and blue sky thinking, and to be able to support businesses across multiple diverse range of businesses. There are over 100 scientists, and more than 50% of them with PhDs who are currently involved in basic research and supporting businesses across cement, metals, textile, both viscose fiber and filament yarn, in the metal space, value-added metal source, even in the services space, both fashion, retail, as well as banking sectors. The objective of ABSTC is primarily to be able to work on sustainable and substitute raw materials, improve processes, do green substitutes, hybrid green storage materials, as well as digitization. It not only does own research, but actually works in collaboration with universities, and has been working with US universities, as Michigan State, Georgia Tech, MIT in US. It also works with Hayden, TITK, ExxonMobil in Europe, as well as Indian institutes like our own BITS, IIT, University of Chemical Technology, CSIR, and many others. Besides our having a dedicated one common research agency, we also have every business on an average between 50 to 100 scientists involved in to support the business for be able to not only introduce new product or optimize processes, but we have to continuously upgrade existing set of products. And an average of them support businesses both at Hindalco and Novelis, Pulp and Fiber, Ultratech. Some of the, on overall basis, the group, if you total over a range of 30 years, 4,700 patents have been applied for. Currently, the group holds close to 500 patents that it has achieved, both on process as well as products. Some of the success stories which have global success nature by them is, for example, in pulp and fiber, we've developed a third generation technology known as Lysol, which is a cotton-like fiber, much superior to the viscose staple fiber that is existed, and has its own, which has its own challenges on the environmental front. The new process significantly reduced environmental footprint and no gaseous emissions, and has 99.6% solvent recovery, as substantially lower water utilization. Another area we've had significant success has been in both cost and energy reduction in aluminum smelting. Probably the work that we've done is helping around the world. We've improved not only on anode assemblies, but cathode assemblies, cell lining design, and magnetic compensation, and all of this. So moving on to the agenda for today, the objective of meeting has been well articulated. It is about interconnectedness of science and technology with business, and how interdisciplinary nature of research has the potential to impact multiple sectors. We want to explore how this interconnectedness can harness to a greater extent to elevate India among the top innovative economies. I'm extremely delighted to be able to introduce our esteemed set of panelists, both from the academia and the industry. They are experts in their own field, and we are going to be deeply enriched as they share their experiences and views on a wide range of topics. I'm happy to introduce firstly Dr. Raj Reddy, uh, who is a university professor of computer science and robotics and Moza bin Nazir Chair at Carnegie Mellon University. He's an expert in the field of artificial intelligence and has earned multiple awards and accolades, most notably Padma Bhushan in 2001 by Government of India. I'm really delighted, sir, for you have to having taken your time out and joined us today. I understand you were also awarded the Turkey Award, which is an accolade for the Nobel Prize of Computing way back in 1994. Before I hand over the floor to Dr. Raj Reddy, let me also have the benefit of introducing our other panel members. The second on the list is Dr. Lawrence S. Scute, Lawrence C. Scute, which is the Director of Global Science and Technology at Lockheed Martin Corporation. Before joining Lockheed Martin, Dr. Lawrence served for 33 years in the U.S. Federal Service in the Department of Defense and Health and Human Services. Most recently, he was the Director of Research, DOR, at the Office of Naval Research, where he led the discovery and invention portfolio for the U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corporation. Welcome, Dr. Larry, to the panel today. The next on the group is Ms. Sindhu Gangadharan. She is the Senior Vice President and Managing Director at SAP Labs India. She has over 2 decades of experience with SAP and the first woman to head SAP Labs India, which is the company's biggest R&D center outside Germany, their headquarters, and leading uh, hub of innovation. Welcome, Ms. Sindhu, to the panel. And finally, we got Dr. Rajesh Jurikar, who is the Executive Director, Auto and Farm Sector at Mahindra Group. Uh, Rajesh has diverse experience across automobile and farm equipment, advertising, and media. He's a director on the board of Mahindra and Mahindra and serves on the boards of several Mahindra Group companies in India as well overseas. The format of today's discussion will be each of our panel members will introduce their work that they've been doing on research and how is it linked to business, and then we'll follow up with questions. I now hand it over to Dr. Raj Reddy. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Himanshu. So the question that was asked was, how will technology impact large-scale commercial adaptation? I think I'll be repeating things that many of you know, but I think we need to set the right context. Namely, the purpose of technology and purpose of industry should be the welfare of society. And so there's a phrase that we use called doing well by doing good. So my suggestion is we explore the options of how industry in India can actually make money at the same time help the people in need in India, right? And so we have 3 or 4 related things that you might already know. One is the famous phrase by C.K. Prahlad on the bottom of the pyramid. There are about 700 million people below, at or near the poverty level in India. It keeps varying, and even though they're very poor, they daily wages, daily incomes vary between $2 a day to maybe $10 a day. They have a disposable income, let's say, of $1 a day. And if Indian industry is going to be global, they have the opportunity to serve about 3 billion people that are in the same space, even if they have only $1 a day of disposable income to spend, so that adds up to $3 billion a day, or about $1 trillion a year. And that's what C.K. Prahlad was saying. There's a fortune to be made at the bottom of the pyramid, and India should specialize in that part of the market, the products and services using technology that would have effectively help the poor people, the people at the bottom of the pyramid. And so each of the industries in FICCI should ask, how are we helping the people at the bottom of the pyramid? What can we do to help the people at the bottom of the pyramid? The other famous person that has talked about it is Dr. Abdul Kalam. He used to use the phrase Pura. Pura stands for providing urban amenities for rural people. And since they don't have education, health, and products and services that are routinely available in cities, the question is, how can technology help in that area? It turns out technology is really at the forefront in all of these. And at this point, unless Indian industry wakes up and does something, the two giants of retailing, Amazon and Walmart, will take over all of Indian industry solutions. And the tool they have is some technology innovation we've made in the last 10 years. You are able to speak, you don't have to be literate. Don't even have to know how to read or write. Using a smartphone, you can speak in your local language and be understood by an intelligent agent, and also other, you can even talk to other people in other languages. So speech-to-speech translation is a well-understood technology, except it hasn't come to India. And so supposing, I know already Amazon already has the technology to build intelligent assistants in shopping and other things. They can essentially dominate the whole country's retail market. Because if you can essentially order anything you want, even if you're illiterate, from the thing, and then have it delivered within 12 or 24 hours or something, there's nothing you can compete with. And so the same is going to be true. Walmart is not quite there in voice technology, but they can buy it, or from Google or Microsoft or Chinese or something, and they will be there too. If they can buy it, so can Indian industry. And the great thing about that has happened is democratization of that whole retail sector. You don't need to be as Amazon or Walmart or even a Reliance. You can be a small store. You can be a small storefront, and you can set up your own storefront and sell everything there. And there are new products and services available like shop.com and Instacart and so on that are offering the related services so that you can sell your products and services. Except they don't, at this point, have the Indian language technology so that they can speak. I think FICCI and Indian industry should take this as a challenge and set up their own storefronts for everyone in every language of India, and be able to dominate the space before they lose. Amazon will eat their lunch otherwise, or the Amazon, Walmart, Reliance will eat their lunch, which doesn't have to be the case. No matter how small you are, you can actually dominate your space if you're technologically aware. That is my recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Raj. You introduced us to the concept of bottom-up pyramid. We also talked about Purab. Both of it is extremely prevalent. And yes, we have this whole discussion in India to be able to serve value conscious people, which you are talked about bottom of pyramid, and the fact that there is this huge discussion that happened in India. Innovation initially was called Jugaad, and as you are an Indian, even though you live abroad, you are familiar with the word Jugaad, and how do you differentiate a Jugaad from innovation is a question that we will come back to you to ask it. But we're very delighted to hear your views on your area of specialization, both on AI and the fact that speech recognition is going to be the next big technology going forward. But let me just move on and I'll come back to you in a minute. So we want to first hear Dr. Larry, and we want to know your views. How is it that innovation is happening in the space that you are in, especially in the defense space, and what is it that India can do to replicate the success of US, especially in the defense space, doing what we call Atmanirbhar. Over to you, Dr. Levy.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I think first I'd like to point out, Lockheed Martin is the one of the world's largest aerospace and defense companies. We've had a long history in India of partnerships, of creating innovation challenges with FICCI. It's been a remarkable opportunity. And I think there is as a defense company, we're heavily engaged in university research. Obviously, we have our customer base, but we also have our supply base of university faculty, university research, the translation into the commercial sector, which has been going on for decades. Defense leading commercial. Now we see the reverse, where commercial innovation is providing opportunities into the defense sector. And I think the ones we hope to talk about today, I really see as the brains, the fuel, and the sensors, and the agile manufacturing that is going on in the commercial world is really enabling the defense sector and vice versa. So that is artificial intelligence, the big data, where we now can do using AI, we can have human accuracy at machine scale, and the implications of that for everyone. The 5G networks that are coming into place to allow ubiquitous sensing. And then I think we need to really look at this concept of not just additive manufacturing, but really agile manufacturing that's allowing boutique manufacturing, but at scale. And so no longer is a bespoke suit something that I buy on Seville Row. I buy it online, and it's manufactured. And so this global supply chain that enables a defense company, enables a commercial sector, all of that is enabled by the AI, the big data, sensors. And so in university world, and so we really see this government, university, and industry relationship is so critical for Lockheed Martin, but it's also critical for the entire economic sector. And so what is the role of government? In my prior life as director of research, we heavily sponsored the SBIR program, which is something that is exceedingly powerful in the US. It allows small companies to be created. It also allows research to translate from the universities into small companies to create the jobs, to create the innovation opportunities. But we're very focused on AI, quantum, material science, both thermal, structural, information materials, as well as in the aerospace, of course. And so I think with that, we can then come back to hopefully some interesting questions around the role of these three entities: government, university, and industry, and the interplay, which I believe is similar across whether it's defense or commercial, which is very different than it was, say, 50 years ago. So thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you, Dr. Larry. Thank you for the introductory comments, and we are really looking forward to be able to have an interaction with you. I'm going to move forward to Ms. Sindhu from SAP, and we have to hear our opening comments.
Thank you so much, Himanshu, for that introduction and also for the wonderful context setting at the beginning. It was also very good to hear about what you do at the Aditya Birla Group, and also I was very fascinated to hear the perspectives from Dr. Reddy and also Professor Schutter. So yes, I am representing SAP. As probably most of you know, we develop business applications, and maybe to put it into perspective, almost 77% of the world's business transactions touch an SAP system. So these are the kind of business applications that we build and take to market. We've been in India for more than 2 decades now, and we've grown to a strong family of more than 13,000, building some of the best-in-class products and taking it to market across industries. Now, to just step back a bit in terms of the context of this talk today, right, and what we're all here and trying to bring our focus to, we're all in the midst of dealing with a crisis, right? I mean, brought on to us by this pandemic that we're all dealing with. And in this context, I'm actually reminded by this quote by one of the former US presidents, and I know the US politics is very much on everybody's agenda, but I'm going back to John F. Kennedy, who once observed that the word crisis, right, in Chinese is composed of 2 characters, one representing danger and one representing opportunity. I mean, we can debate if he was entirely right on the linguistic part of the house, but I think the sentiment is so true and it resonates very well with what we're talking about today, because the crisis definitely presents us that choice. And this is particularly true today, and there's a huge opportunity for us as well. And so in that context, also prioritizing innovation, and I think is absolutely key given this opportunity that we have. And I think it's a huge way to also unlock this post-crisis growth. And this is very much relevant for India, but also for organizations like ours. And I think in this regard, also this juxtaposition of getting the business as well as the scientific community and the need to do it, and the fact that we have to come closer is even more urgent than ever before. At SAP, we've been doing this over decades, and we continue to focus on this. But at the same time, if I were to reflect, I think it's clear, and I'm sure all of us would agree that the interaction between business and science is not always smooth, right? Because it's also a difference in culture in terms of the 2 fields, and often there's a lot of difference in also the expectations from each other, and what is it that we target. Because businesses like us, of course, rely on research and totally rely on it to innovate and build those new solutions that we take to market. However, I think there's a disconnect in the pace at which we work in the industry, and that of research and innovation. And collaboration sometimes is not always straightforward, like I said, and hence it also needs a little bit of a curated approach, especially in the areas that all of you have talked about already, emerging technologies, where I believe a strong alignment between academia as well as the industry can really facilitate that real-time development of high risk, but at the same time, high potential research. And in this context, I'm also reminded of this quote by Professor Ian Buchan. So he's from the University of Manchester, where I think if you just look into what he said, and I think it's spot on for this conversation, the translation of research always needs to be a two-way street, right? And you need to have this always on analytics where you're feeding research into practice and practice back into research. So if you ask me, there's definitely a stronger need for that kind of agile, for that very multi-sector partnerships to research, to constantly test and constantly deploy those actual insights in kind of a beta testing model, if you may will, right? And have honest conversations always in the context of the potential end user, and making sure that the data that we work on really meets the needs of the target consumer. So reiterating what I said earlier, I think although it can be challenging for business people and scientists to appreciate each other's priorities, I think it's important that we all realize that the opportunity exists today to even further that collaboration, to get innovation faster to the markets that we work in. And we've seen some fantastic collaborations also reflecting from the SAP side of the house, be it in AI, or we're leading the whole focus on Industry 4.0 and many others, right? So many beautiful collaborations that have resulted in that. So in conclusion, I'd like to say the art of possibilities via this collaboration is absolutely immense. And I'm sure through dialogues like this and platforms like this, we can clearly leverage the combined capabilities of both these communities. And looking forward to also sharing with you in the context of this conversation a lot more of what we do at SAP.
Thank you, Sindhu, for actually setting out the context for us, and we will to share with us uh, the work that is happening, some of the work that is happening in SAP, but morely what are the possibilities that is going to be in future. We look forward to have a much in detail discussion. Given the fact that we have a diversity of a group from academia to uh, working with government in the defense and IT sector and industry, I think I'm pleased to be able to now hand over the mic to Rajesh, who works with the agriculture sector and the primary sector for the country, but extremely important. And we like to know how is it that the research, science, and technology are getting adopted by this sector. Over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you so much, Himanshu, for setting it up and making sure I don't go off brief and talking on farming and not on automotive. But I did indeed intend talking on farming, so thank you for setting that up. And been pleasured listening to all of you before Himanshu, Larry, Sindhu, and Dr. Reddy. Dr. Reddy, I do want to pick up on a comment that you made, which is so integral to our business. And that comment you made was about doing well by doing good. And in Mahindra, we have, kind of motto, if you will, which we call RISE. And we always believe that the farm or the farm equipment business is one great way by which we can keep doing well and doing good. And I'm going to kind of use the few minutes that I have to talk about some of things that we're doing. So when we kind of thought about where we want to take the business, we had borrowed a phrase used in different industries, but said, let's look at democratizing technology for farmers, small farmers from the small landholding size globally, enabling them to rise. And the choice of the word small landholding farmers was an integral part of our strategy. Because what we saw when we looked at the data was that a very large number of farmers are around the world are small landholding farmers. So a majority of the land, so 60 odd % of the land is held by less than 10% of the farmers, right? So the balance farmers all hold small parcels of land. And I guess a lot of innovation and the discussion we're having between business and science is also about what vision you have or what brand purpose you have. And as we thought about our brand purpose, we said what we really should try to do is bring in technologies which are used by large landholding farmers and make them affordable and accessible to small landholding farmers, which is really, Dr. Reddy, your analogy with C.K. Prahlad's way of thinking. Because really the solutions for small landholding farmers will be very different. And I'm intentionally using the word affordable and accessible. Because when we start thinking about business model and business model innovation, it can't only be by way of products, but also creating access. And as a part of this whole strategy, we created farming as a service as a vertical, which we've now recently branded as Krish E, which is in Hindi, Larry, and others who are non-Indians. Krish is about agriculture, Krish E, but we've kind of tweaked it to make it Krish-E, which is the digitization of farming as the kind of go-to-market branding. And we've broken this up into different verticals, and there isn't necessarily time right now to talk about all. And maybe Himanshu, if there is time, we can talk a little bit more in the question answer. But two key things I'll touch upon at this point of time. One is the whole space of precision ag, and the use of digital technology, artificial intelligence, where we've tied up with and invested in startups around the world, Canada, Switzerland, and India, to create solutions for specific crops. So grapes, sugarcane, potato. These are three areas in which we're doing a lot of work developing artificial intelligence solutions. And we are seeing in the early pilots that we've done that productivity can go up by as much as 15 to 20%. In things, for example, like fertilizer variable rate spraying, where when you've done a digital map of the soil, you can actually pick areas on the farm where you will do specific nutrient spraying, which is controlled by the algorithm out of the soil mapping that was done earlier. So we believe that technologies of this kind are very relevant and useful to farming, can transform the country, and can over periods of time create a good business model. We also rental will be a very important part, because we believe that for adoption of technologies of this kind, there will have to be less of capex and more of opex from the farmer's point of view, and we have to innovate in business models to make farmers pay per use rather than necessarily have to acquire assets. So we, just to sum up my opening comments, we believe strongly that there is a lot that we can do by frugalizing, by truly understanding consumers, farmers in this specific case, and adopting technologies which are being developed in different applications to improve and drive productivity of farmers. With that, Himanshu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. Truly a very diverse group and really specialist in the areas. So let us quickly dive into the topic that we have all gathered today to discuss. How is it that the science and technology can work closely with business to improve the lives of overall citizens, and especially the bottom of pyramid citizens of the country. And I would like to start my first question with Dr. Reddy. I was quite excited to read his profile and read about the work that he's doing on artificial intelligence and robotics. And the reason we are quite excited in India is because India believes that as far as digitization is concerned, it is going to run hand in hand with the developed world. We have been behind in the first, second, third generation of introduction of mobile technologies, but as far as fourth generation is concerned, we quickly caught up, and exactly the kind of solutions that we were talking about made it a lot more affordable, and that is the reason why country is the second largest in terms of size of total volume of data that gets consumed in the country. And almost, even though only 55 to 60% of Indian population access internet, and there's a huge potential of the 40 odd percent which are currently not there, but even the 60% constitutes to a large number of over 700 million people. So by sheer size, and there is a huge discussion in India about 5G, as Dr. Reddy was talking about. But before we get into all of these topics, it is the applications that we are all looking forward to. And that's where we believe artificial intelligence, robotics are going to make a big difference for India to take a leap from being a pure internet society for the citizens of India, for the internet society for the business of India. The small scale, very large. There are 4 million small scale in India which are waiting to digitize and to be able to use the latest applications, the fourth industrial revolution, latest applications on AI and robotics. And we want to hear from Dr. Reddy, what is it that his advice is for the business? Which are the right applications on the AI? Which is the area where should he start with robotics? Which end of the business they should start is the question that we want to all hear about. Over to you, Dr. Reddy. You are on mute, Dr. Reddy. Can you unmute, please? Yes,
the
please.
primary goal we should have as a country is fully connected population. If we want to use any of these technologies for the whole country, we need fully connected population. And what that means is, if everyone on the planet in India, including children, should have access or use of a smartphone at the minimum, and they should be connected through to the internet in some way. And as Prime Minister said, we should have digital literacy everywhere. Everyone should know how to effectively use these things. And so there's an economic justification you can make also. If you look at the cost of the pandemic this year, it is estimated the GDP will go down between 10 to 20%. I don't know exactly what it'll end up as. Even if it is only 10%, that's $300 billion, plus or minus something. And if you were to give every person a free smartphone, that'll only cost $140 billion, about $100 a phone times 1.4 billion people. So it's about half the cost of the loss we suffered this year, and once we give it to them, it kind of opens up the opportunities in huge number of ways. Children can be used for education. Right now, there is this concept of remote learning. Only rich people have have the benefit of remote learning. If you're in a village and you don't have a smartphone, you can't use it or something. And more importantly, if there's no connectivity, and if you don't even understand how to use it as a parent or a teacher or something, even the teachers are not all fully digitally literate. So in some sense, we should concentrate initially at the first part on fully connected population. We should do whatever the industry and the government should do, whatever you can do to fully connected population. That is, you need a computer, you need connectivity, you need computer literacy. That is, you need digital literacy. And once you have that, then the kinds of things Rajesh was talking about, of providing answers to farmers. Right now, I come from a farming family. If I'm a little farmer in my village, I wouldn't know anything. Essentially, there's a lot that is known about what is needed for a farmer. First of all, if I want to use drip irrigation, or if I want to use soil testing, or if I want to do any of those things, I don't even know where to begin, and then I don't even know who to ask. Who do you ask when you don't know who to ask, kind of thing? That's where the smartphone comes in. If it understands my local language, I can ask a question. What should I do about soil testing? It may not give me the exact answer, but at least it'll kind of lead me through the thing. In order to do that, I must be digitally literate. I must understand I can actually search for answers on the internet using my local language and immediately get some answer. It may not be perfect. And I can go and say, I don't have the capex. I don't have the money that is needed to do drip irrigation. What do I do? Again, if groups like Mahindra will provide the answers, create the content, and when they search, it'll automatically appear saying, if you don't have money, we have this rental program you can get. Then you say, where is this rental program? How do I get it? All of this can be discovered on the internet. Answers can be discovered. So the most important thing industry can do is to aim for fully connected population. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate your thoughts and ideas. Of we are also in India trying discussing with the government ways and means to move from an internet connectivity or broadband connectivity currently at a 55%. How do you connect the next level of 500 million people who currently their need for digitization is at the higher order? Let me move on to Dr. Larry. And you are an expert in defense, and defense an area which is closely connected to technology. And we understand aerospace defense is your area of specialization. We are keen to hear which is the next frontier of technology on that. But also, our worry remains that what about carbon footprint? Will that this next technology be able to resolve both the climate change issues and carbon footprint, or will it end up in consuming more, as has been in the past? Yes, Dr. Reddy.
So I think the next frontier in aerospace and defense is always higher performance, whether that's speed or agility, and we think about those things in terms of physical, but they're also in terms of network and the ability to share information across platforms. And so I think we're seeing a whole renaissance in and revolution in military affairs, to use a term, in how the platforms work together. And at Lockheed Martin, we make platforms that are on the surface of the water, underwater, in the air, and in space. And so from a company perspective, but also from a customer and opportunity perspective, is how to make all of these work together seamlessly and to take advantage of each other. The effect of that is on the civilian side is all of the same technologies that are used and the same techniques that are used transfer over to other sectors. I grew up working in defense, but also in the healthcare industry, working at the NIH. And it's interesting that the handheld ultrasound that everyone uses for fetal monitoring, not many people appreciate, but the techniques that are used in that monitor came from the radar world, and were a direct translation by an engineer from one domain to the other. And we see that every day. That there's always this sharing of information back and forth. And so you asked about climate change and carbon footprint. I think the big change, and you mentioned it actually, Himanshu, which was the reduction in energy use and in carbon dioxide output in aluminum manufacturing, and the huge benefits that have occurred in the aerospace metals world that digital transformation and digital twin engineering have allowed, where you can get to net shape casting and thus reduce the impact on the planet of the waste and of the time and energy needed to remove those materials. And that really was pioneered in the aerospace industry, has transferred over. Our partner Tata, is well schooled in this, as well as going into these new materials, the organic materials, the carbon fibers and the like. I see huge opportunities. And then from a climate change comment and perspective, the techniques and the modeling and the sensing and the data needed to make those analyses are predominantly from spacecraft, right? So we're doing quite a bit of this as a geo look in. There's quite a bit of science going on. The recent asteroid capture, where we went and grabbed material from the asteroid that NASA very excited about. It made the news internationally. That was a Lockheed Martin spacecraft. And so all of the techniques that we use for defense translate over into that world. And I just feel this is where the government customer needs to look across, so that the government healthcare worker needs to look across to the government defense worker and the researchers and realize that if you go back to the university, it's the same faculty. And I think there's an opportunity here, which is this global connectedness. There's tremendous opportunity. And as part of our global supply chain as a company, we have suppliers in India that we work with. We have close to 10,000 small and medium enterprises around the globe supplying parts for our assets and for our partners. And many of those are in India. Obviously, there's opportunities everywhere. And as Dr. Reddy indicated, it's important to step up to that level playing field. And so again, I'm very optimistic. Quite a bit of good work going on in India, and will continue. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. I want to next ask Ms. Sindhu to be able to tell us about automation. Automation is way of life. Who has not used SAP's supply chain automation? But I think we need to go beyond the ones which are already known, which is helping improve productivity of the business. And the business is looking forward to ideas from companies like SAP. How is automation going to help improve overall final delivery of business results, improving profits, upgrading products, and probably improving customer experience? What are the early trends on automation that you see, and how is this science and technology going to become part and parcel of business and finally reach in the hands of consumers?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Himanshu. And if you just, again, like I was saying at the beginning, right, our customers are solving some of the world's hardest problems. And our purpose is really, and our vision is really to help them with the right infrastructure, with the right business solutions, to help them run better. And our core purpose being to improve people's life. And our vision has always been for the future of enterprise IT to make software hyper-personalized, modular in nature, and really support those business outcomes of our customers, right? And again, coming back to the context of this conversation, so the strong focus on research is really what has helped SAP offering these kind of best-in-class services and business outcomes to our customers. And I have to say, also this deep domain expertise is what you see reflected in each of our product lines, and it's a testimony of the fact that we support the core industries that we go to market with. And so every time we build our products and the way we take our solutions to market, the focus has always been on the voice of the end customer, because this is what helps us in driving those kind of automation, driving those enhancements, and really making that business sense, and also constantly being able to adhere to the changing market dynamics in which our customers operate in. And here I want to call out also this notion of a human-centered innovation all around automation, but I think it has to be human-centered. And that's also deeply rooted in our design thinking philosophy, which has been a core DNA of everything that we do at SAP, right? Because we place our customers at the center of everything we do and really carry out the build in such a way that their feedback and their iterations is constantly brought back into the core of our products. So in this sense, it's really that deep customer research that we end up doing in that process. And if I just talk about some of the innovations that has resulted because of that deeper automation that we've brought into our core portfolio, Larry talked about supply chains. And if you just reflect on our strategy around creating a very unified and open and an intelligent business network, I think in these times this becomes extremely relevant, because the current health crisis has also demonstrated the importance of having a very resilient and a very automated supply chain. And what we've done is really taken our philosophy of how we deliver those end-to-end business processes to go beyond the boundaries of our business, right? And really looking at how we can bring together connected, intelligent enterprises, say in a particular industry, to facilitate that kind of a seamless exchange. You talked about automation, I talk about seamless exchange of data, insights across the business, across geographies, and to drive that kind of collaboration and agility that's needed in supply chains today. And the idea is here, again, we start by connecting business partners across the supply chain, but also bringing together the research and development, bringing together engineering, the planning, the sourcing, the procurement, the manufacturing, the logistics, the asset operations. I mean, we talked about agriculture quite a bit. I mean, think about the kind of technologies that are needed when you're talking about assets in that context. So including everything around design to operate or source to pay kind of life cycles. And that's really the way in which we drive the automation forward. And also, if I just reflect on our recently announced industry cloud initiative, it's again a great example of how we're bringing some of the innovations on the vertical edges in close collaboration with our partners to build those innovations which are very specific to the industries that we support. Or similarly, if we look at our Climate 21 initiative, we talked about sustainability and how important that is, right? And our purpose is really not just about looking at the top line or the bottom line, but really also introducing what we call as the green line, right? And how are we building those sustainability metrics right into the core of the product so that as customers use it, they are able to take those very decisive steps in terms of how this is resulting in certain decisions and how that impacts the climate, right? So the Climate 21 product is really helping customers to assess, analyze, and act on product-related greenhouse gases and other sustainability issues, helping them in those responsible business decisions. So, Himanshu, these are some examples of what I want to call out of how SAP has been a true pioneer in also looking at some of these trends and building in those automation that we bring in across those industries and across those best-in-class products.
Thank you. I think this is a new concept I've introduced to a green line, and obviously go back and talk about it with my team going forward. So we're running short of time, but I wanted to run one more round in a quick fire way. But I quickly want to move to Rajesh, and if you can, and continue with the topic of automation. But how can automation, smart agriculture, and farm implements be implemented across in the agriculture sector? How can sensors, smart agriculture be part and parcel of life of a farmer while they adopt to a much more higher level of automation from a current level? Yes, Rajesh.
Yeah, thanks, Himanshu. I'm going to try and keep it short because I am mindful we are out of time. So there is a lot of work happening in the space of IoT, sensors, etc. already in farm machines, even at the lower price points like an Indian kind of market. So we do have an offering which we call DigiSense, which is an IoT-based input which goes on tractors, goes on farm machines, and it moves to higher levels where you can synchronize the use of the implement on a tractor based on the sensors picking up information, and the use of the implement gets automated. So there is a lot of work happening in that space already, and I think the Indian market will see a lot of it as well. Himanshu, back to you.
Thank you. Quick fire back to Dr. Reddy. I think we're moving away from technology. We wanted to pick your brains that there is a close association between academia and business in United States. It doesn't happen in India so much. Also, we see a lot of funding from of the government, which is going through the academia. What steps should India take to make sure that academia and business can work together, and a lot more funding comes to public institutions than what they're getting today, so that the more basic research can be done in India?
The academia industry collaboration in India is suffering because it's not completely true. There have been concepts of consulting, industry consulting in universities for 100 years or so, whenever they need some help. But it's not been as extensive as in USA, primarily because of lack of probably understanding in a lot of the industry sectors. It would be good to ask someone like Rajesh to ask how many industry people, universities is he in contact with, and how is he using it. If he's doing, say, for example, IoT-based systems, they have enough competence internally within Mahindra to do that, but perhaps some combination of universities. There are several IITs and IIITs that are doing IoT-based research that might be useful. But unless there is an understanding and interest, it won't happen. But the other thing is this whole issue of fully connected population. There are ways in which industry and universities together, maybe with the government, can make this happen, because what it requires is out of the box thinking. Namely, if 45% of the population doesn't have smartphones, what is it that we can do? They can't afford it. And the question is, how do you get it to them? There are a number of ways in which these things can be subsidized. And what is now, let's say, 5,000 rupee smartphone, you can probably give it to some people for as little as 1,000, and that requires industry and the stakeholders to actually step forward and subsidize it. So I think I would be interested in hearing, Rajesh, you mentioned IoT. How many industry, university partners does we have, and what do they do?
Sure. The only challenge I'm having that I'm getting knock that we have last 3 minutes left, but I don't want to lose the opportunity to hear from the other three. 1 minute each. Dr. Levy, we're really keen that you're actually working well in US with the government. So, what do you see the role of government in bringing business and science to closer? And what steps should India take to do that?
So I
If
think
we
it's
can get a quick
critical.
answer. Yeah.
It's critical, the small business innovative research laws, the SBIR laws that we have in the US that then allow the large corporations to work with small companies. These come out of the universities. That allows us to work with the universities. The government sponsors university research, but it also sponsors innovation, which is very distinct from invention. And I think those rules are critical. It's a great role for government. And there's a number of questions around that area, but I think that would be the one place I would say there's value to having government add in, and it would benefit the universities and it would benefit the companies. Now I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Larry. And quick one for you, Sindhu, if you can tell us, the SAP does so much research and quite impressed what you've been talking about. But how can we encourage to work SAP along with R&D institutions, with research agencies, and with the education institution, academia? What's your thoughts to be able to both of them work together so that the overall percentage of expense on research can go up and it will be far more widespread?
Yeah, I think I'll keep my response short, and I want to pick on what Dr. Reddy said at the beginning, right? Talking about technology for the welfare of the society. And if I just reflect on our principles at SAP, I mean, I talked about decades of this co-innovation that we've been doing with the academia and research institutes. But it's also, I want to call out that our intent for research with the academia and intent for collaboration with the academia is not just confined to domains which generate revenue pipeline for us. Rather, we really believe in leveraging capabilities to drive technology for the good of the society. And I want to call out one example, Himanshu, which very recently, right, our machine learning team sitting right out of here in labs in Bangalore worked very closely with the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore as well as the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in building the city-scale epidemic simulator, which is an agent-based simulation model to kind of infer the impact of non-pharmaceutical interventions of COVID. Now, today, if you ask me, the solution has passed various levels of testing and it's really been accepted across the states. And if you ask me, I would say we need more of this, right? And we need to have that triangle between the government, the research, and corporates like us to really drive those kind of innovations, which is the need of the hour. And this is where organizations like ours are absolutely committed to that. And we're constantly in dialogue with the government through NASSCOM and the various bodies like PICI and so on to actually drive that forward and see where we can apply our technologies and innovation for the true change that we want to see in the society.
Thank you. Thank you. Last
If I
question to
may add
Rajesh. I know there is a... Yes, please.
If I may
Yes,
add one comment to Dr. Sindhu, Cloud Shira, who is the founder of
Yes.
SAP, one of the founders, has been a great philanthropist and has been working with universities and various other places. And so, congratulations, Sindhu. SAP is on the forefront of doing the right thing.
Thank you. All great comments from learned Dr. Raj. And Rajesh, even though Dr. Raj has asked for IoT, I just wanted to we were more keen to understand, you do so much work in Tier 2, Tier 3 rural markets. How difficult it is to introduce innovation in those markets? We are very, very clear, Tier 1 cities, big businesses, startups, all are very, very innovation focused. What about Tier 2, Tier 3 rural markets? What's your experience in that?
You mean as deploying innovation for those customers or those markets, or creating
That's
innovation?
right. That is right. Deploying innovations and even making them part of your research. How can we make Tier 2, Tier 3 citizens to become part of it? Because everybody is observant today. They have a lot of great innovation thinking ideas. But how do you bring that and get into mainstream?
I think the whole digitization wave that we're seeing across the country, and I've been closely associated with rural India for many, many years. I haven't seen anything like it as I have in the last year or so. Though Dr. Reddy did talk about the percentage of population, I don't think that's representative, because there is a lot of sharing of gadgets when it comes to, so access in home is of an order of magnitude which one cannot imagine. We are now seeing everything happen on digital in rural India, and except really the very, very poor people, I'm not talking about that category of people, but otherwise the access to internet and digital, I think, is a huge pivot point and going to be a huge driver of innovation. We're already seeing that, and a lot of the things that I have been talking about earlier, or many of the things that all of you have spoken about, are potentially very possible. I think it's the hotbed for innovation opportunity, because digitization is going to bridge all the gaps that we may have seen up until now. Access to information asymmetry, and there is so much that it's going to change.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I think we come to the end of the session. The interconnectedness of science as business cannot be discussed in a short period of 45 to 50 minutes. There is so much to discuss. But I really like to thank our panelists, esteemed panelists, Dr. Raj, Dr. Larry, Sindhu, Rajesh, for coming out with some very enriching thoughts and ideas. India is at a cusp of economic growth, and for us, participation of science and technology in day-to-day life and adoption by business is critical for the next phase of its growth. Thank you so much, and all the very best. Dilip, would you like to say something?
You're on
I
mute,
can't hear you.
Dilip, you're on mute.
Thank you, Himanshu, for ably moderating this session. And Larry and Raj, Professor Raj Reddy, thank you for joining. Thank you, Sindhu. And Rajesh, great seeing you again. As usual, you bring a different perspective to it. Thank you, and all the very best. Keep safe, stay happy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
So much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Really enjoyed the session. Thank you so much.
Solutions and Map My Genome. A lot of us know Map My Genome for the pioneering work that they've sort of done. And it'll be interesting to get her perspective on some of the newer technologies that are sort of coming in that space as well. And then I also have Megha, who's the director and the program management at Uber, who's also part of this panel. And it'll be good to sort of hear from her on some of the things that Uber is also doing, including newer technologies that they're sort of adopting and leveraging as well. So why don't I start off with you, Professor, a 2-minute introduction and an opening statement, and then we can sort of go down to the rest. Professor, you are on mute. Yeah.
Right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
So, Dr. Gupta, Mr. Kaney, and members on the panel. So let me also thank Vicky for this opportunity. I'm very honored. So about myself, I'm essentially an emeritus professor at Stanford. Still fairly active in US and China industries. And not so much in India, but also a little bit here in venture capital. But but in 2019 and 2018, I got involved with India quite a bit, and I came to India, I think, in 2019 about 8 times, meeting with the Prime Minister's office and the Prime Minister himself on some issues I'll talk about a little later today. So otherwise, I'm fairly involved with 5G and in AI area, and I don't teach anymore, but I consult into industry and do some teach and mostly now in the US, but also sometimes in China. So with that, let me say a few words about some remarks. Mr. Kaney asked me to say a few things about what he said was 5 technologies that are important to India's economy, and a little bit about the VC industry in India that serve high technologies. So the big 5 technologies that have the greatest value for tomorrow's economy and national security, which is also important, are information communications and AI. I'll just call it ICT, so information communications and AI. Other one is energy, particularly renewable energy, storage and transmission. That's going to become already important, but even more important. Third, of course, is bio, it's much in the news today from the COVID vaccine and much more. Next is automation and robotics, particularly in manufacturing. And finally is nanotechnology, which produces advanced materials to quantum gates and quantum technology. Of these technologies, the information and communications and AI are the most foundational, as it underpins all the other technologies. One cannot develop a future vaccine or even develop the current vaccine or build a large-scale renewable energy grid or an automated factory without ICT base. And of course, ICT already supports every important vertical in India today: banking and retail, social media, healthcare, etc. Going forward, let me say a little bit about ICT. I'll drop the other technologies. So ICT has 3 layers. The top layer is the application layer that we all use, whether it's banking or social media or calling up an Uber car. And then the service layer, which actually provides the infrastructure, wireless networks, internet, operators who provide these services, and the bottom layer is the foundational layer is called core ICT layer. This is the layer which actually produces the hardware we use, hardware and embedded software. This layer designs and manufactures equipment from phones and laptops to wireless base stations, cloud data centers, and so on and so forth. And of course, this layer is heavily dependent on semiconductor technology to deliver the chips that build these systems. 5G, which is very much in the news today, is also part of the core ICT. And so core ICT, the key ingredients are computing, various kinds of application-specific computing, radio and optical frequency transmission, a lot of algorithms, quite often I'm involved with that, and quantum technologies. So in fact, the current US-China confrontation is all about the rising concern in the United States about China's rapid improvement in core ICT, particularly in 5G, AI, and quantum, which is the core of the core. And so these are most strategic for any country. And it's about the total market value is about $1.6 trillion global. And about of that, about $275 billion is R&D component. So there's a lot of R&D in this technology globally. And it's dominated by companies headquartered in the United States, China, East Asia, and Europe. And the industry is largely in the private sector. No countries, including the United States, is self-reliant. The smartphone that you may buy today is probably technology from about 7 countries and about 70 companies. So it's a very globalized supply chain. So let me say a bit of remarks about India. India has done very well in the application layer. We have a mix of international companies, but also local companies, and done extremely well at the service layer. Our cost of delivery of wireless networks is extremely cheap, the lowest in the world. It's brought enormous gains to India. But where it's been disappointing has been the core ICT layer, which actually builds the core technology. Here, Indian companies have very little market share, and probably less than 0.1% of the global industry. And this creates many vulnerabilities. And that has brought me to India about, I think, 7 times in 2019. I've been meeting with the PMO and the PM, saying that this is not acceptable. And I've been suggesting a 10-year target for India to get to about 5% of global revenue. And this means expanding our current base by hundreds of times. It's not easy. And let me just leave it here, and I'll talk a little bit about what I think is going on in India, and also make some remarks about venture capital situation in India, particularly in regard to core ICT. Thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Professor. That was indeed helpful, and thanks for the insight on ICT and the layers in ICT. And I'll sort of come back. I had a couple of questions really popped into my head, but I'll ask them later on once we sort of go through this. Dr. Gupta, would love to get your introduction and brief opening remarks as well.
Yeah, so good evening, everyone. Thank you, Vicky, and my esteemed panelist and the moderator of the day, Mr. Kaney. So let me begin. DST has been pioneer as far as the extramural funding for the research goes in the country. But there's another side to it, whereas we are able to translate whatever you can say the outcomes of research from lab to market. And who is the vehicle to translate all these commercially viable products and services to the market through the route of entrepreneurship? So the board which I am currently heading is National Science and Technology Entrepreneurship Board, which came into being way back in early 80s, and where entrepreneurship was unheard, as our main target area was institutions of excellence of higher learning, and marrying entrepreneurship at institution level was a very far-fetched thing at that point of time. But having traversed the journey for nearly 3 decades, so heartening to note that now our institutions, our talented youth, our technical manpower have really become a hotbed and seedbed of new ideas, innovations, and we are taking it forward through the route of incubation. That's our flagship activity in the whole board. And currently we have a network of more than 150 incubators spread all over the country, hosted at premium institutions, both public, private, and we are engaging with different models to experiment with, as our nation needs are really quickly changing. We have to adapt to newer models to actually create the right kind of enabling and conducive ecosystem for the country. And DST being sector agnostic, we are actually experimenting and focusing on variety of technology domains. Professor Paul Raja rightly highlighted, ICT becomes the backbone of most of the startups. Nearly 60% are experimenting and leveraging this ICT based technologies, and since last 5 years, with the call of Startup India and Stand Up India as a national initiative, there's no looking back for us. We have actually enhanced most of our offerings funding fivefold, and so is the rapid response from all the stakeholders across the board, be it backward integration through institutions or forward integration with the corporates, industry champions, multilateral bodies, and results and the outcomes of our programs have been really heartening. And Nidhi is the new program which we have really coined since 2016 with the start of Startup India movement. And very recently, as a rapid response to the unprecedented health crisis of COVID-19, we coined a new program, Kavach, and healthcare-driven startups are being funded, are being supported and mentored for enhancing their market readiness. 60% of these, out of the 50 plus supported startups, are already in the market. So that's our journey so far, and we are actually constantly revisiting, re-engineering our program offerings to really take a call on our new mission of being self-reliant or Atmanirbhar India. We are actually embarking on the new policy, science and technology innovation policy, to have a faster and inclusive growth and sustainable growth of India, and will also integrate with the national education policy. So things are falling in very right place, although we have multitude of challenges as highlighted. We have to focus on various other aspects, but journey looks very exciting, be it in COVID or post-COVID. We are all geared up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. And yeah, it is indeed exciting times. And I'm glad to see the kind of work that your group and your department is doing, especially with regard to the incubation and supporting some of these really, some of the newer technologies, and sort of trying to really support and push them towards commercialization. And I have sort of, through some of the accelerators that we have sort of been involved with, have seen some of them come through. And it's indeed good work to sort of see that. Happy to sort of say that.
Thank you.
BJ, can I sort of request you to sort of give your introduction, plus also opening remarks, and talk about what you're sort of seeing, at least because you sort of, I think, have access and sort of have seen the trends in the valley, which is where there's a hot bit of activity, but you sort of have a front row seat as an entrepreneur, investor, and also as the president of Thai Silicon Valley. Would love to get your perspective as well.
Thanks, Vinod. Yeah, so I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been in the Valley for a little over 30 years now. I got to this Bay Area in about the late 80s, and some of the companies that I have founded, one of them, California Digital, built some of the world's largest Linux-based high-performance clusters. So in 2004, we built the world's fastest supercomputer at that time for the Lawrence Livermore Labs. And more recently, I was CEO of a company called July Systems. July, again, was a product company which came out of Bangalore. And we were in, basically customer acquisition and customer engagement using Wi-Fi and mobile phones. And so July Systems was acquired by Cisco in 2018. And for the last 2 years, I have been giving back to Thai, which has helped me in my own entrepreneurial journey, just giving back as president of Thai Silicon Valley. So from my perspective, I think one of the things, and you had specifically, asked me to talk about how technology is creating new business opportunities. I think what I have seen is, and what we are seeing is that, technologies like the Ubers and Airbnbs, those had already started disrupting established businesses in a big way and making it, much, much more easier to conduct business. And post-COVID, I think some of these technologies and businesses are becoming even more accelerated. So for example, you could have an app which could be, for example, for shopping, right? And so like an Instacart or, something like that, where people are not encouraged to go in large numbers and go do grocery shopping or whatever. But from the comfort and safety of your home, you can use these apps to actually get your groceries or essentials delivered to your home. So it's going even beyond just e-commerce, but the convenience of doing some of these things. Or if you take sort of virtual conferencing systems, right? Like the WebEx that we are on today, or Zoom. I mean, these technologies were already there, but they're getting more accelerated because of COVID. And I think moving forward, even post-vaccine and post some kind of normalization, I think we will always have this hybrid sort of environment going on where, because we have gotten also used to and appreciating a lot of the value that these kind of companies are bringing, we can actually sort of see that, I mean, like Thai ourselves, we conduct this conference called ThaiCon every year, and 7,000-8,000 people come to that. But this year it was virtual, but moving forward, we will always have a in-person as well as virtual component. So it'll become sort of a hybrid. And so many of these technologies are here to stay. And so I see many of these technology disruptors that are going to remain and stay. And whether it's in ed tech or in e-commerce, or whether it's in sort of all of these technologies that I talked about, I think they're going to be here for a while. Thanks, Vinod.
Thanks, BJ. That was good to hear. Dr. Anu, would love to get your perspective. You're in a sector that's now sort of in VC parlance the flavor of the month, where everybody's jumping in and wanting to sort of participate in investing in your sector, and that across is not just healthcare but biotech, wellness, all of that. A short introduction and your perspective.
Sure. Thank you, Vinod, and it's fantastic to be with all of you here. I have been an entrepreneur since the year 2000. I first started a company called Ossimum Biosolutions. In India, we ended up acquiring companies in the US, in Netherlands, and in Germany, and we became one of the largest genomic services companies worldwide. And it was a very interesting journey because it was not a typical journey that a small startup in this space would have taken. But anyway, we were one of the earliest. It was before the human genome was actually sequenced. So I've sort of seen the evolution of how all of this happened. And about 7 years ago, I felt that there was a vast inequality between the data that was generated between the Caucasian population and other populations that were neglected, like the Indian population, and therefore felt an urge to build something in that space. And that's how the emergence of my second company, Map My Genome, came about. And while we started off first with building something for the consumers, where consumers could sort of get access to a genetic test and the comfort of their homes and get information about a lot of wellness factors, and as well as predisposition to diseases, look at ancestry, look at whether certain drugs work for them or not. I think over the last 7 years, we also created a lot of value in genetic counseling and looking at complex genetic disorders. But I think a bigger change in terms of what happened or how quickly we transformed was when COVID came along, and we sort of very quickly were able to turn around and create a COVID testing lab, and probably were able to do this faster than most of the regular diagnostic labs in terms of innovation in trying to get to mass testing of corporates as well as other things. Mostly because I think molecular biology was something that we are much more familiar with. It was just that we weren't offering this to an average consumers earlier. So I think the reasons for that were that we are used to looking at data as being an integral part of what you need to capture. And the second was, of course, the need to automate and automate such that you can scale it up very quickly. So whether a consumer was trying to get to one test or the other, I think for us we are able to look at thousands of tests being done in a day, very, very quickly turn around. And I think today we've basically turned it around. We have 2 labs, one at the airport, so that you can actually turn around and give reports to consumers within 4 to 6 hours. So I think where I feel that the real value for this sector or the genomic sector will come is the fact that while the pandemic is going on, I think a lot of value is being placed on testing and looking at how, if you can sequence variety of different genomes to find out if some of the tests that we are doing continue to remain accurate, whether some of the if some of the information that we have can be useful for drug targets as well as vaccines. So I think it becomes a very, very integral part of what we're going to see the future to be like. Because in the end, I think health is going to be not just about being a nice to have thing that people were calling it earlier. I think now there's a necessary part of what people need to survive. So I think that sort of changes the way people look at companies like ours in the genomics field. And I think, even though COVID has been really bad for a lot of different areas, I think it has actually helped in accelerating some of the activities that otherwise would not have happened.
Thank you, Anu. And you sort of, mentioned two words that are sort of very important and sort of a focus for us from a investment perspective. One is data, and the other one was automation. And of course, the fact that this current crisis has sort of accelerated adoption. And I think the timing was also right. I think there's a lot more appreciation of the work around, genomics and gene therapy and all of that. And I think that's going to start probably being a lot more where there may be, significant opportunities for some of these that are sort of currently, either in research or in testing phases to sort of becoming more and more commercialized. Megha, can I sort of request you to sort of give a short introduction and also sort of talk about, some perspective on some of the newer technologies that you're sort of seeing, especially with whatever is happening with Uber, which actually has been sort of a poster child for leveraging technology to really build a business.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everyone. Glad to be part of this discussion. Within Uber, I lead an organization called Global Scale Solutions. We run scale technology programs for all Uber's lines of businesses, whether it's on mobility, delivery, freight, and so on. So functionally, like what my team runs are things like internationalization and localization. We run quality initiatives for all of our products. We run engineering and data services. We manage large-scale technology operations such as like map editing, machine learning and AI operations, risk and fraud investigations, and so on. So it's a bunch of different capabilities that are like a horizontal foundation for all of the Uber's technologies and lines of businesses. And I manage a global team based out of Hyderabad and Bangalore in India, San Francisco and Boulder in the US, Hong Kong, Amsterdam and Mexico. So pretty much all of the major mega regions. Wow. Coming back to the topic that we are talking about, technology creating opportunities. When I take a step back and try to classify the major themes of impact technology has created over the last decade or so, broadly 3 themes come to mind. One is empower and enable. I think technology has created opportunities that we couldn't think of before, or totally disrupted the way we would think about those opportunities. Like a decade ago, thinking of getting a cab at a press of a button was unimaginable, and Uber and many other companies have made such things possible over the last decade. The second bucket of impact, I think, of technology has been around acceleration, whether it's improving productivity and efficiency, whether it is making opportunities available to more people at scale, and so on. And there, all of our investments on AI, ML, data, and so on are big and happening. And then the third bucket of impact has been on connect and collaborate. Of course, we just spoke of things like video conferencing or social networking and so on, but it's also connecting in the new normal, right? Especially in the context of Uber, through the lockdown and the pandemic. In the last few months, we've launched services like Uber Medic for the healthcare professionals to be available at their places of work to provide their services, or Uber Essential to make sure essential objects and things are you're able to deliver it from one person to the other despite the situation that we are in. So there are various ways we are able to like connect and collaborate. And then if you look at the intersection of technology and business, we could always talk about like a list of technologies that are up and coming, but I truly think the difference is in the house. And the the startups that have done well, the technology innovators that have really changed the game, I feel like the three things that have stood out is one, they're all mission driven. They're trying to solve for an inherent problem and make that experience seamless for their customers. And that brings me to the second point, that they're truly customer obsessed, especially in the context of Uber. And as we think about safety now, it has taken a new meaning with health safety. So the mask identification technology we have launched worldwide, or map closures that we have updated on our app across hundreds of countries, or making the earners assistance available in various different formats regionally and globally. All of those have had like technology at the heart of it, but the bigger thing has been truly being customer obsessed. And then the last part is your readiness to make big bold bets, fail faster, and iterate. And I think that's been at the heart of how like Uber thinks of it, and like really invest in people, but also make those big bets to iterate from there on. And many such stories over the last few years. Looking forward to sharing some of these in the discussion in the next few minutes and learning from the rest of the panelists. Thanks, Vinod.
Thank you, Megha. This was that was very interesting to sort of hear. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the newer startups or some of the newer ones that are sort of leveraging technology, sort of really doing it with this obsession of seamless customer experience, right? And I think a lot of this is also got to do with the fact that though technology is sort of becoming ubiquitous, there is sort of a lot of newer technologies that can sort of all be combined together, right? I mean, and I think that sort of really makes a customer experience a lot more seamless. And this obsession with sort of giving superior customer experience is something that we are starting to see a lot more in India as well, right? And I think we are not necessarily just sort of looking at copying things that are sort of coming in from other parts of the world, but also sort of saying, how can they be adapted for the local population, and sort of looking at solving problems that are more unique to us. But then some of those are also sort of becoming ones where are there problems that are sort of unique to emerging markets, and can we sort of take them to not only from India, but from India to other parts of the world, including Africa and Southeast Asia. Professor, you sort of gave us a great opening about the 5 technologies that you sort of think are going to be sort of the future. And how you sort of think they will sort of redefine opportunities. And one of the ones that you talked about was ICT, and the fact that India had done relatively well on the application and the service layers, but not so well on the core, which is where we sort of seem to be lacking. Is there still an opportunity, because that's a fairly significant opportunity, is there still an opportunity for India to be a player in that space, one? And a short answer would sort of really help. And if that is the case, what is needed to sort of be able to really sort of push for that? And then, we also have a whole bunch of other technologies that you talked about: energy, bio, automation, as well as nanotechnologies. Nanotechnologies has been around for a while, but where do you sort of see some of these sort of becoming something fairly significant with India's push for Atmanirbhar, and sort of also wanting to be a fairly significant player, not only within the global economy, but also within a lot of the emerging markets where India is now starting to gain leadership?
I'll stick to core ICT because that's my singular focus in India. I might make some remarks around that. The R&D budget for this industry is about 1.6 trillion, 1.7 trillion. It's almost 65% of our GDP. So it's a very, very large revenue, and it's a very complex, very deep technology. You spend, as I point out, 270 billion in R&D per year. So generally, the view is if you get your smartphone in your hand, it's obviously just not the investment of one company and 1 year. It's been invested over many years that created the base technology. So it's probably anything we buy today has an underlying base R&D of $1 trillion. So obviously, India cannot become self-reliant. No country is self-reliant, and therefore. And I pointed out to the PM, he knows this, and I think hopefully some other people in the government understand it. So we only have to join the club. And the club today is South Korea, Taiwan, China. China and US are the big guys. South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan are the smaller peoples, and certainly Singapore too, and Israel. And we really have to join that club and take a small percentage, maybe 5%. It's actually very difficult because the entry barriers are really, really high. For example, semiconductor fabrication of fabs. I've been involved in China for many years. I think in 2016, I remember when Xi Jinping talked about investing $100 billion, 2014, I think, $100 billion. Now they're up their game, it's even more. And despite that, today, China only has stable node at 20 nanometers, and they have an experimental node at 7 nanometers. US has 7 nanometers, which is stable with Intel and global foundries, but Taiwan actually is ahead. TSMC is at 4 nanometers. These companies are probably investing something like 10 to 15 billion a year, each of these countries. So it's a very high investment. It's not only money, it's also people. It takes many, many years and literally tens of thousands of PhDs to build these technologies. So even if we throw money at it, we don't have the base here. But should India do it? I think we have to. We will be the most populous country in the world, and we have enormous talent and capability. And in fact, many of these industries in ICT are, as you know, are managed by Indians. A lot of startups in the Valley are done by Indians. I myself have done 2 semiconductor companies in the Valley many years ago. So I think India, from a variety of viewpoints, and also I think now that China is growing so rapidly and its dominance is very high in ICT, we really cannot ignore this area. So I think it has to be done. The question is, what are the barriers? Very high investment and very high risk. This is a global industry. So any startup, let's say I want to build a chip. Recently, Institute of Science, I think yesterday, only came to me with some proposal. It's only see the light of the day if it can compete with everybody else in the world and do better, because only the best wins in this technology. And so it's very high barriers to entry, investments, skill levels, and we have largely we're isolated from the rest of the world. Not only technology and skills base is important, but also product management and marketing. All these things we don't have in India yet. We have to grow them. So my thesis for the government is this is a critical area. We cannot do core ICT. India really has to write off its ambition of being of a digital developed economy. We really have to have this piece, but it's very difficult. And so it's only possible China has been able to do it, and up to some extent, the US, of course, because governments are heavily involved. And for government involved and create policies, it's got to understand this industry. It's got to understand how it's structured, the intellectual IP base, all the barriers that countries throw at you. And so we need a proper understanding of this industry in order to create policies which will work. And I think that is missing today in the country. We have certainly people within the country who look at technology, but they're not immersed in this industry, and there's very little of it in India. So unless you really travel abroad and you're connected well, the Chinese have done this. I mean, they have hundreds of people who are very well connected, understand all the issues. So they're able to come up with solutions, governmental interventions which actually work. So with that, I'll also say a little bit about the VC situation. The VC situation is very strong in India. But again, I think investments in core ICT has been slow, mainly because of high investments. Typically in semiconductors, I think Arun may have some thoughts too. I've done 2 semi companies. In 1998, my first, and 2004, my second. They were acquired by Intel and Broadcom. I raised 75 million in my first company, and the second one I raised 105 million. So it takes a lot of money to even know whether you're going to succeed. And of course, in 1998 companies directly were competing with Intel, and we had to beat Intel on that chip in order to get market share. So you're taking on these big giants and you have to beat them. So it's very high barriers to performance. And so for all these reasons, I think the Indian VCs have shied away from this area. But this industry has to be built by the private sector, and it starts with startups. So VCs have to do a role, and this is where the government has to play a role. And the government can only play a role if it understands this technology and this ecosystem. And I've been pushing with the PM and the PMO that we should create a commission. Space Commission and Atomic Energy Commissions have done well in their own way. And of course, they have a different model. They actually do the design engineering internally. This has to be done in the private sector, of course, except maybe the fab. But and I think the biggest issue is lack of venture capital. Now, many countries, and I certainly know the Chinese model, but also Australian and other models, where the government comes in to help de-risk venture capital who can come in and fund these companies. So for all that, I suggested we should form a commission, and I've been telling the PM that he should chair it himself. It's so important for the country. He agreed, and I think he's issued some orders, but our bureaucracy moves a little slowly. I think Dr. Sharma may know something about it at DST, but primarily the PMO has been involved with this. So I'll stop here, but I think for India to be counted in technology, we really have to pay attention to core ICT. This is the mother lode of all technologies, and particularly we have a competitor to north of our border who's rising very strongly there. So I think it's a challenge that we should take up.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. And comprehensive policy, long-term vision, and of course, enough risk capital are all necessary ingredients. BJ, you have sort of been part of things like this. You've sort of also built businesses, including hardware, especially with California Digital. Some perspective from you would also be helpful, and then plus also to talk about some examples of some of these companies that have been successful in sort of being able to leverage technology and build huge businesses around it. And especially some of the examples that have sort of come out of the Valley, I think would be helpful.
So I think, as Professor Paulrad said, it is going to take, massive investments in ICT to, build semiconductor fabs or do some of the core technologies that are required. It's going to take not just money, but it's going to take resources in terms of human, sort of capital, as well as it's going to take time. And so I think till we get there, right, there are a lot of other things that countries like India could be doing. By the way, we know that if you could go on mute, I think I'm getting some feedback. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so, and so there are lots of other things. And so, I'll just give you a few examples of companies that are coming out of the Valley right now, which are really booming, right? And so if you take, for example, there's a company called Poshmark, started by a fellow Indian entrepreneur called Manish Chandra. And what Poshmark is doing is they're actually allowing people to take their used items, right? It could be clothing, it could be, handbags or shoes or whatever, and selling it, right? So a lot of, particularly women like to always have newer styles or newer clothes or newer bags, etc. They don't want to keep using the same things again and again. And so they are, disrupting this marketplace. But what is mind-boggling is they just exceeded about $200 million a month in revenues, right? So they are a multi-billion-dollar revenue company, just filed an S1 to go public, etc. And so, again, this is not something that is going to take billions in investments or whatever. So most companies today, right, they can get started very quickly thanks to AWS and all of that stuff. They don't need to make massive investments in stuff, like infra, etc. They can get started very quickly. And once they prove that the business model works, then of course the VC money will be very helpful to scale it quickly, not only within India, but globally, right? And so, whether it's an Uber or Ola, or all of these are great examples. And so I think, we should also sort of not hold back saying, hey, we are waiting for these massive investments to come in place, because those things could take 5-10 years to bear fruit. So in the meantime, I think there are a lot of opportunities that I am seeing for disruption and scaling of businesses using technologies that are readily already available, right? So there's really no barrier to entry. It's something that we can very quickly get started today. So that's sort of my perspective.
Thank you, BJ. Anu, you sort of started talking a little bit on sectors and opportunities within healthcare. The post-COVID world, or the post-pandemic world, will sort of look radically different, and I'm sure there's also going to be rapid adoption of technologies. Where do you sort of see significant opportunities sort of emerging, especially for countries like India, where those opportunities are going to be fairly large and also long-lasting, sustainable?
Thank you. So I believe that a lot of the initial health tech companies that came about, I think most of them focused on things like doctor appointment. Now, the problem was that I think doctors were not very used to doing this. And therefore, I think even though they did attract a lot of venture money, I think they really didn't do as promised. So I think in the end, I think companies that will do well will be the companies that will create value long term, both for the customer as well as for the patient. I mean, for the physician, at least in the healthcare space. And the way I think the pandemic has sort of accelerated this is that I think for the first time, I think a lot of physicians are forced to do things that they never wanted to do in the first place. And I think that will help many of the companies to do things that initially they were visualizing it from their end. So it was okay to think that, people will do this in the comfort of their homes because, that's what the consumer wanted. But, as long as the doctor didn't want it, I think this wouldn't happen. So that was the first thing. So things like, while it's the doctor appointment and all of that will be fine, but it has to be combined with some real value that they can give to the customer. And the value is not just in doing that, but in to be able to do something that will allow them to do things that otherwise could not have been done, which is when you went to a hospital and you had a paper-based system that didn't give you an understanding of what was going on with you over a period of time. I think, that's the value that a customer or a consumer is looking for. They want to understand trends, right? And I think that value needs to be given. The second is to be able to make it such that from a physician point of view, is it going to make it something that's going to make it easier for them? And I think while they've gotten used to certain things like WhatsApp and a few other things that are there, I think most of the apps or other things that are being built have to be built around the fact that you have to do based on what the customer or the final customer wants ultimately. And the third will be that if we can combine multiple types of data types, right? So for instance, we have a lot of genomic data, and we are now starting to do some amount of clinical information. We also collect a lot of phenotypic information. So putting all of that together and ultimately giving customers something that they would not have viewed from any other point of view. So combining things that, one, they never had access to, but two, to be able to combine it with clinical factors that were available earlier, but not in a format that they now can see. So we'll start seeing a lot more of that happening. And I think the other thing that we will also see is that earlier we started seeing a lot of large hospitals that were, a lot of them got investments because they had 500 beds, large number of beds. I think what we will now start to see is that as the consumers and physicians are starting to get used to a little bit more virtual sort of way of doing things, we'll start seeing a little bit more, smaller, physical operations, but a lot more value that can be provided online, and to be able to give them that in a way that is much easier for people to do. So ease of use, putting different data types together, automating the process, but still remembering that you can't change behavior in one day. I think those would be the key factors to think about when we are looking at health in general. At least on the genomic side, I think we start seeing a lot more value because genomics has been providing a backbone to a lot of the important data that is required. But I think as the pricing has started to come down, we've started seeing, for instance, the same thing that was being done at like 4,000 or 5,000 rupees today can be done in a few hundred. I think we'll start seeing that because of the cost to the customer, I think what we'll start seeing is a much more widespread use of technologies like that. So there will be that, and they will also start seeing that we can collect more data and actually start using this in future medicines, future vaccines, and others. But we have to be able to do that by putting in together a lot more of the different data sources together and collaboration. So I would say those would be some of the key things that are at the top of my mind right now.
One of the things that I sort of see as an investor over the last few months has been a lot of startups focusing on wellness and overall wellness, right? And a lot of them are also sort of leveraging technology for delivery of wellness. And the second aspect where I'm sort of seeing a fair number of startups are sort of leveraging our own local systems of medicine, right? Be it Ayurveda, and looking at a lot of them that are sort of natural herbal remedies and things like that. Do you think some of these can become fairly large and sort of be sustainable over a period of time, or is this a short-term phenomena considering the times that we're sort of living in?
So I think, I think right now a lot of people have started drinking tulsi and variety of things. I did that even prior to the pandemic, right? So I think there is value, but I think it has to be substantiated with science. So we cannot just say just because it's traditional doesn't mean it's good, right? And just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad. I think that's definitely, there's some part of a lot of people who believe that's true. And I think the fact that a lot of Ayurvedic products have become popular is a testament to that. But at the same time, I would say in the end, I think science holds its fort, and it is the one that constantly evolves. So you have to be careful that whenever you're doing something like this, it has to be substantiated. So I'm not saying that I don't rule out everything traditional as being bad or everything being modern as being good, or the other way around. I think it's important that someone does little more research on it. I mean, just the fact that, if you look at my first company, the name was Osimo Biosolutions, which came from Tulsi, right? And the reason we chose it was the fact that I wanted to sequence the plant and I wanted to find a little bit more information about it. So I think what we will see is that there'll be a lot more data that will come over the traditional, traditional medicines and other things that we see. The other thing is also wellness. I think it's definitely got a boost. I think we start to see that for people who do have a stronger immune system, who understand the immune system, and that's primarily what we are doing, right? Then I think once you understand that, you are able to make those changes that is there. But some of it is going to go away. Some of it will disappear because I think as soon as they get a vaccine, people will forget about it. So we have to take that factor into it as well. But the second is that traditional medicines and other things, I think, have a lot of value. But I think that compared to some of the other countries, we have not been able to do a lot. I think over the last few years, there has been the Ayush Genome and a few other things that have come up. So I think we need to pay a little bit more attention to marry science as well as our ancient knowledge. And I think then we'll start seeing true value coming out of it. Till then, I think some of the fad which exists today, I don't know how many more people, I think there are some doctors that said that people have been having so many things right now that there'll be a lot more side effects to people just overdosing on immunity boosters and other things. So I think that's a big challenge. So it has to be done in a way that is sustainable and over a long period of time, and has to have a very strong foundation in science. Only then I think we'll be able to see them becoming large businesses.
Dr. Gupta, can you share some examples from the recent crisis where you've sort of seen innovators coming out of the incubation programs that you sort of run and have sort of adapted and responded to market needs? And I know that the incubation programs that the DST runs have done phenomenally well, in my opinion. At least have seen a bunch of opportunities for investments. So I would love to sort of hear your perspective on some of them that have sort of very quickly adapted and responded to market needs. And then very quickly talk briefly about the factors that sort of determine the translation of a technology that sort of is coming, or at least in the research stage, or at least sort of being experimented with at the incubation centers to sort of commercializing them. And a lot of them are sort of, in that phase, right, where they're sort of in sort of incubation phase, but very rapidly coming to the commercialization phase. So I would love to get your thoughts around that.
So COVID-19 sort of extraordinary challenges. These sort of challenges require extraordinary responses as well, and that too very timely. So this has been sort of a blessing in disguise for many of our startups. So all of us have heard about the repurposed drugs, but no one has heard about the way our talented pool repurpose their skills, repurpose their machinery, repurpose their different, you can say, the team, collective wisdom of the team to really rise to the occasion. Everyone in the entire ecosystem, not only the startups, I must say, be it the incubators, be the government officials, be the industry champions, we all work day in and day out, overworked collectively as a team. So this was truly a showcase of power of collaboration, given the clear sense of purpose and the criticality of the time we had. As I shared with you, we launched the Kavach program, Center for Augmenting War on COVID-19 Health Crisis. And as a rapid response to this, we could quickly source about tap 851 odd startup solutions. I will just share 4 or 5 stories which really are the showcasing like how we could really fast track and rapidly accelerate the market deployment in a fraction and a few months, which could have taken few years, because these are all manufacturing side, product side solutions. So just first to name with, we didn't have, when we started off in March, any high quality ICU grade ventilator, indigenous one. The team from, I think you must have heard of Noka Robotics, which is led by IIT Kanpur alumnus. They were in March, before the lockdown, they were the typical robotics based solar panel cleaning startup based out of Pune. But when this crisis struck, all orders got cancelled, and this happened, and quickly they repurposed their skill set to become a medical device company. And this happened, and I think in a flat one day they could figure out what would be the design of a prototype, good high quality ICU grade prototype would look like. But then that is not the that's mere beginning. How do you really make it a working prototype? How do you reach out to the hospitals too? Because when you are actually designing a ventilator, you have to have pulmonologist on board right from the day one, right from the drawing board stage. They have to really approve it. They will be using it, and you are playing with the life of the people. So it's just a high-end product. And then how do you really figure out the supply chain part? Many of the, although it's an indigenous one, how do you really source the sensors which are say imported? So the collective power of the IIT Kanpur alumni network also played a very critical role.
How are you?
Sanjay, good to see you.
See you. Hi Vivek, we have never met. I'm Sanjay Nayak. I'm the chairman of the FICCI Council and working along with Jagdish.
Good to meet you.
Likewise, I run a company called Tejas Networks. This is stuff that Desh Deshpande and myself had started some 20 years back.
Right. Wow.
So, yeah.
I haven't spoken to Desh for like 3 or 4 years now. How's he doing?
Great. He was actually the keynote speaker earlier in the day. So he woke up from Boston and he did his talk.
I was just telling Sanjay that we've managed to make sure that 2 of the leading guys that we got today, we didn't give them much time to sleep. Desh was
so
up.
actually, let's count, make it 3. So Paul Raj is up from Stanford. He's just doing his other panel. Before that, we woke up Desh. So you're the lucky one, Vivek. You got the latest time slot. Hello, Mr. Chhabra. How are you? We haven't met. I'm Sanjay.
Sorry, hi, Sanjay. Is that
Yeah. Now we can hear you. You are on mute actually.
Yeah, good. Yeah, great to see you.
Likewise. I used to meet your predecessor, Mr. Tirumurthy, and before that, in fact, your Mr. Raghavan, the guy who PS Raghavan who started, he lives in Bangalore. So we exchange a lot of notes. We meet in many places.
Sir, I'm sorry to intervene, but you guys have gone live, so I'll request you to start the session. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Okay. Thanks, Eti. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining in from. This is the FICCI and Department of Science and Technology's annual Global R&D Summit. And as the pandemic has done to most of us, unlike a physical summit that we do in Delhi, this time it's a virtual one. And I think we were discussing with the panelists just before this that this has been an extremely positive part, if there is any, of the pandemic, where there are many, I guess. And that's one of them, which we've this time been able to get some absolute luminaries in the next, today being day 1 and then day 2 and day 3 of the summit. And it also allows a lot of people to participate, which would have been very difficult earlier. In this case, where it would have only been some few folks who make it to the center where we organize it in Delhi. So my name is Jagdish Mitra. I am the co-chair for the committee for research and development, science and technology and innovation. And I also am the chief strategy and growth officer for Tech Mahindra. So welcome you all. Thank you for joining in. The topic today's discussion, as we end up the session for the day 1, is a very critical one. And before I introduce the absolute luminaries that I have the privilege of talking to this evening, is the topic that we are talking about, which is an Afro-Asian century, the way forward. And this is probably something that's not new. We all know that Africa and Asia are the regions that will drive what we are calling as a long-term global growth. And COVID probably has been an aberration, but also has allowed us to look at different ways to speed up the growth, maybe probably using digital, maybe probably using a lot more of the technology. The strategy suggests that, Asia's GDP will overtake the GDP of the rest of the world combined by 2030. And the region is expected to contribute roughly to about 60% of global growth. We believe, obviously, India will play a critical role in it. India will definitely drive some of that global growth that's going forward. But also, Asia Pacific will be responsible for 90% of the 2.4 billion new members of the middle class entering the global economy. And for everything else like this, we refer back to someone's research report, and who better than to look back onto McKinsey's, who have predicted that about 5.6 trillion in African business opportunities by 2025, the world's youngest and fastest urbanizing continent. Africa will have 24 million more people on average living in cities each year between now and 2045, more than India and China combined, as per McKinsey. Now, why therefore are we discussing it this evening? What has that got to do with R&D and innovation across this? When we discussed this, we said we are obviously not living in a cocoon. India can be a participant in it, but India has to work with a global set of organizations, countries, participants to drive the development of science and technology and its impact on business. And that's what we are going to try and cover today with the leaders that I have got on the panel. What we're going to discuss is primarily the fact that the problem statement that we have in front of. The problem statement is we are in developing countries and regions have struggled to conduct the R&D in a structured, cohesive, and calibrated manner. Unlike the West, which has really driven the academia and industry partnership, the importance of research and development from the government, and the ability for the organizations to invest in R&D. So while we all sort of say that we need to do more in R&D in the corporations in our part of the world and in continents such as Africa, there is a lot to be done. There is a long way to go. And that's what our panelists are going to talk about. We've got as I said, we've got absolutely an eclectic panel, a set of people who are masters of their art and masters of their science, I may say. This is a science and technology session. So the first one I will start is with someone who has graduated, probably not in science, but is probably has a bigger role in building up what this country's strategy would be in terms of partnership and in terms of the role that this would be. So that would be Rahul. So I'm going to introduce Rahul Chhabra. He's the Secretary ER for Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. Rahul has had a very strong and elaborate role across different countries that India has diplomatic relationships with. You were just mentioning prior to this how he was in the consulate in Washington, D.C. And I have known him, and our businesses have known him for his variety of roles across Africa and other parts of the continent that he's operated in. Rahul, today at headquarters, has worked as Joint Secretary in Central Europe, and he's also been permanent representative to the United Nations. So he has probably the world from a variety of diplomatic angles. As I said, has an undergrad degree in economics and from the prestigious St. Stephen's College, then the Delhi School of Economics and IIM Calcutta. But apart from all of that, has played a very critical role in the strategic economic relations that India has built with multiple countries around the world. So Rahul, thank you for joining us, and all yours, sir. You're on mute, Rahul.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So thank you for those kind words of introduction. Just taking off on whether I'm a science graduate or not. People would debate whether economics is a science or not, and then treating diplomacy also. But that will get into another eclectic discussion. So let me just stick to the time frame and the topic. No, in terms of the Afro-Asian context of the discussion. So I'd like to start with how leaders in India and Africa have interacted over the last few months. At the Prime Minister level, at the External Affairs Minister level, it shows how technology, people have adapted to that technology so quickly, and the leaders have been so comfortable on both sides of the camera, I should say. I was going to say spectrum, but both sides of the camera, that it really shows that India and Africa can demonstrate a sort of leapfrogging effect if this is taken really further to the next level. So in that context, just to build up on India's development partnership, how it has evolved over the last few years, maybe decades, because it goes back a long time. It's becoming more versatile, it's becoming more technology intensive, and a vehicle for sharing really cutting edge technology, which is in the field of digital and AI, artificial intelligence. Some of you may be aware, but our development partnership was actually it started off being called the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program. So science and technology was really at the heart of our program in the early 60s we are talking about. So sharing that with Africa was really, it was part of our DNA, sharing the technology, because we had realized even at that time that, whatever the knowledge we had gained, it wasn't meant to be, just patented and with IPRs and all that. It was meant to be shared with our developing partners. And that is how the South-South cooperation and India's role in that has really come up. In fact, Africa has been the largest recipient under this ITEC program. So just to tell you, so it's not just, though our neighbors are also now benefiting from it, but Africa as a continent is. Here I'd like to bring in, Prime Minister made his famous 10 guiding principles of India's development partnership with Africa in Uganda in 2018. In that, he mentioned the fourth pillar in that was really about how we were committed to sharing our experience of the digital revolution to support Africa's development, improve delivery of public services, extend education and health, spread digital literacy, expand financial inclusion, and mainstream the marginalized. So you can see how this science and technology has always been part of our India-Africa sort of experience. And then, of course, we have shared in terms of agriculture, climate change, Again, it's when you talk of agriculture, it's again technology. It's agricultural technology that we've been sort of sharing. We share similar agroclimatic conditions. Through ICRISAT, through the International Livestock Research Institute, and other. In fact, this is also an area we've done a lot of sort of trilateral projects. So we've brought in that angle also to our collaboration. The entire spectrum of this collaboration, we have given 183 lines of credit to 41 countries, consisting of a corpus of over $11 billion, close to $12 billion US. So it's 42% of our entire lines of credit scheme that has gone off to Africa in that sense. In terms of capacity building slots, just over the last 5 years, it's 50,000 under this ITech program. So 50,000 African students are being trained under this capacity building. So otherwise, of course, I'll just wrap up my initial remarks and then we'll come back later. Trade with Africa, again, we are close to $60 billion in bilateral trade, and India is the third largest market for Africa. We are the fifth largest investor in Africa. So all said and done, and now science and technology is really the driver of this relationship. So I'll just keep my remarks to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chabra. That was indeed very good acknowledgement of the cooperation that we have in the region and the opportunities that we have created and the opportunities probably that exist much beyond, based on the foundation that you've talked about on the ITech program, as well as the cooperation of engaging the African students and so on and so forth. I'll come back to you as we finish the first round of conversations. Then my next speaker is absolutely a very well-known erudite and very well-known in terms of the work that he has done, Dr. Aurobindo Mitra. And I have to call out saying that the only thing common between him and me is the last name. Otherwise, his level of knowledge and his level of achievement that he has is a few exponential levels above what I can even aspire to. So Dr. Mitra is a master's and a doctorate degree holder from University of Cambridge in UK. He's joined the Department of Atomic Energy as a scientific officer. He was awarded the Cambridge Nehru Fellowship to pursue his PhD at the University of Cambridge, and has been in the government for multiple initiatives in science and technology, and is today the Scientific Secretary, Office of the Principal Scientific Advisor at the Government of India, and is advisor and head of International Bilateral Cooperation Division of the DST earlier in 2011. So Dr. Mitra, thank you very much. We're really honored to have you here. And with the situation, with the opportunity that India has and the opportunity that Africa has, and the role that the Department of Science and Technology plays, not only in enabling the policy, but also incubating some of the work that is happening, would be great to hear from you, your views on the Afro-Asian growth.
Thank you. Thank you indeed, Jagdish. And a very good day to all of you, wherever you are. But let me also first express my own pleasure and privilege to be on this panel. And Jagdish, I differ from you to that extent that we couldn't have been on the same panel together, if we were not that professionally connected. And so, yeah, it's been great to see how the FICCI R&D Summit has evolved over the years. And I might confess that I had been one of the, perhaps the initiators of this summit in my previous, wearing my previous hat as the head of international cooperation in the Department of Science and Technology. It's traveled quite a distance, in fact, much before, when I was actually heading the Indo-US Science and Technology Forum. That was the time when the FICCI R&D Summit started, and US was the first partner country, I recall. So it's more than a decade now, and it's great to be here again, speaking on the panel rather than being on the organizing end for so many years for this summit. As you know, very nicely alluded to by Rahul, who preceded me, the importance of international cooperation and the engagement of India across the borders to use science, technology, and innovation as a soft prowess for global good is being pursued for quite some time. I must confess. But I must also say that the unprecedented pandemic has really unleashed a new dimension to the human development crisis today. The pandemic has posed one of the biggest challenges to the entire mankind. And on the aspects of Human Development Index, conditions today are equivalent to levels of deprivation, with the gains made over the last 2 decades, as Jagdish alluded to earlier, having gone completely astray. And an astounding 110 million people have been pushed into poverty, and 1.6 billion children are out of school education. And most of this affected populace, of course, belongs to, parts of Asia, Africa, as well as Latin America. So, in fact, I would say that the pandemic was superimposed at a time when there was already unresolved tensions between people and technology, between people and the planet, between haves and have-nots. But these, of course, I would say these tensions have shaped a new dimension of inequality pertaining to existing capabilities, and also the need for new necessities of this century. At the same time, the response to the crisis also carries the potential to shape new strategies that we are discussing today on how these tensions can be addressed and how these inequalities in human development can be reduced, particularly by deploying the soft prowess of science, technology, and innovation. Can we usher a new global good in meeting the basic needs of the society and the citizenry? Today, all of you would agree that most of the pressing development challenges that the nations are facing are pretty much across cross-border in terms of its dimension. And there is also a scientific and technological dimension attached to it. Science and technology, therefore, today is offering a much, much greater opportunity to allow cross-border collaboration in increasingly recognized as a pillar of growth across diverse sectors covering agriculture, nutrition, communication, education, energy, health, water, transport, manufacturing, climate change, disaster management, you name it. And therefore, I would say that science and technology is now expected, especially in a country like India, to touch the lives of people and to be seen as a tool that enables the ease of living for the common citizen. Therefore, I would say there is a big challenge now to the scientific community in order to actually provide mechanisms and platforms that may be domain specific, but should be able to deliver accessible service through the effective use of R&D knowledge conversions from diverse scientific sectors. I would therefore say that R&D has to play a very important role by integrating the value chain, by involving all the ecosystem players, including the R&D labs, and the private sector enterprises, the startup, and importantly, the society, in order to create a virtuous cycle of supply and demand to feed the economy and create new jobs. Therefore, the aspirations and expectations from the scientific and technological community is now even more demanding and challenging. I would also say, as Rahul alluded to, that the rapid development of emerging technologies in the physical, digital, and biological spheres will also transform human life profoundly. Consistent efforts are therefore necessary to utilize the best potential of such technologies in order to address and mitigate the humanitarian challenges that mankind faces today. In this context, I would say the importance of science, technology, and innovation in achieving the 2030 agenda for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to which most of the nations from Africa, Asia, including India, are committed, is very, very important. And it throws a new window of opportunities for cross-border collaboration in science, research, and development. So this is very, very important. Most of the countries are now committed to actually meet the UN SDG goals and through science, technology, and innovation. And perhaps you would be aware that the Interagency Task Team has recently established a global pilot program on STI for developing the SDG roadmaps. And India is one of the pilot countries, along with Indonesia, Ethiopia, Ghana, Kenya, and Serbia, to prepare national roadmap templates on STI for SDGs. The global pilot program on STI for SDG roadmap is actually inspired by harnessing science, technology, and innovation for inclusive development, keeping in mind the needs, dreams, and aspirations of the people, particularly women, youth, and the marginalized population. And I feel that as a partner country, India in this international initiative intends to build capabilities and skills for harnessing existing indigenous technologies, as well as to make the effective use of the potential offered by emerging technologies, keeping into consideration the associated risks and challenges. In recent years, India has also played a very crucial role at the negotiations for establishment of the Technology Facilitation Mechanism, TFM, along with like-minded countries, raising the need for adequate and equitable resource mobilization for technology development and deployment across borders. The international engagement strategies could be imbibed as a viable mechanism to achieve co-development of technology, joint research initiatives in frontier domains, supported by cross-border open innovation, which is very, very important in the present context. Effective use of technology facilitation mechanism in high opportunity and high priority areas to achieve the SDGs will be transformative, that will empower many deserving and desiring developing countries with which India aspires to engage with. This provides India a unique opportunity to build indigenous capabilities and skills for harnessing what I say, the affordable, accessible, and available technologies, the three ACEs for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And therefore, today I feel that there is a great opportunity for us to engage in a proactive manner by creating a win-win model of collaboration to see how we can leverage this prowess of science, technology, and innovation to meet the SDG goals, especially in the areas like food and nutrition, clean energy, healthcare, and clean water. These are, I believe, the nexus that I call of these four important elements that needs to be addressed in an Afro-Asian context together by providing technologies which can actually meet the needs of the society, which is accessible, which is affordable, and can be ushered through a process of collaboration. So I think this is a very important area that we have today actually decided to discuss, and I look forward further to these discussions. And later on, I'll allude to some of the important technology missions which India has launched that really enables us to achieve the SDG goals through a more collaborative mechanism. So I'll stop here for now and hand it over to Jagdish.
Thank you, Dr. Mitra. I think absolutely relevant in terms of what we are facing today and what possibly we should be prepared for in the future. You talked very relevant about the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think at times this can be seen as cross-purpose to development, but maybe the answer to this is the role that science and technology can play. And that's an opportunity that I think we have between India as a representative from Asia and the African countries and other countries in the region to leverage science and technology for achieving the goals that you talked about. And we'll come back to you. My final speaker for this evening is someone that I have to be immensely thankful of. Because one of the big advantages, as I said, of being able to do this virtually is to get speakers from as eminent as we have on the panel, but also be able to get people who are right now sitting in the Bay Area, and we are able to get to hear them, except that they have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be able to do this. So thank you very much, Vivek, to do this. It's an honor to have you here with us. I think most of us know about Vivek. We've read his articles, we've read his bylines, but I'll still sort of do a couple of lines and embarrass him if I can. That, he is a distinguished fellow of Harvard Law School. is obviously a very well-known professor from Carnegie Mellon, and is a globally syndicated and technology columnist for the Washington Post and many such, and has written quite a few books, and the co-author of The Driver and the Driverless Car: How Our Technology Choices Can Change the Future, which is an amazing read. He writes regularly on variety of things, from medicine to nanomaterials to robotics to quantum, and has been named as world's top 100 global thinkers, and Time named him on the Tech 40. So why we are extremely lucky to have someone like Vivek and the rest of the panel members to on this call on this evening. Vivek, all yours. Looking forward to hearing your views about the Afro-Asian Sunrise Century. Thank you. You're on mute. You're on mute, Vivek.
I was saying thank you, Jagdish. I want to start by shattering some myths about why India and Africa are behind in R&D. And I'm going to make 3 points. First of all, R&D. If you look at the most valuable companies in the world, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, etc., these people didn't do basic R&D. They didn't develop the semiconductors. They didn't develop the core technologies. In fact, Apple has copied every technology there is. It hasn't developed even the ideas behind them. What they did was they commercialized them. Look at India's IT industry, $200 billion and rising. It didn't develop any of the core technologies, not even the operating systems, yet it built a multi-$100 billion industry on top of it. So the magic here is in leveraging these technologies. Then now, if you look at the next generation of companies, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, they don't even have the core assets to build it. They built the platforms on top of it. So you can build massive solutions without building core technologies and without doing that type of R&D. It's basically about commercialization. Second part of it, I spent a lot of time at US universities, at the most prestigious universities in the West, looking at their research systems. And what I realized is that they're completely screwed up. I mean, massive wastage on a scale which you've never seen before. Literally $1 trillion of basic research, which is going nowhere. Why? Because the university system is geared towards giving people tenure. Professors want tenure. They publish papers. The research goes nowhere. So they do all this, amazing research and have nothing and no idea what to do with it. Why? Because they don't understand the problems of the world. So they wait for someone to come to them to say, can we license this technology? And then you have the licensing offices of universities that get greedy and say, no, we want so much from you before we'll give it to you. And therefore the entire system is screwed up. Don't copy it. Don't get an inferiority complex just because the US State Department says India should invest more in R&D. Forget all of that. Do what the Indian IT did. Do what these large companies are doing in commercializing it and being very sensible about using these technologies and building platforms on top of them. The third thing about the future, India, Africa, the Middle East, they own the future. Why do they own the future? Because that's where the people are. That's where the needs are. That's where the pain is. They understand the problems. If you go back 20, 30 years, remember those Cray supercomputers which had export controls that couldn't be taken to India? They cost tens of millions of dollars. This device I have in my hand, my smartphone, is more powerful than 50 Cray supercomputers. No one even blinks an eyelid when you take it across the border. The most advanced sensors, the most advanced AI technologies, everything is available to the poorest of the poor in India. In fact, the poorest of the poor in India have supercomputers now. The poorest of the poor in Africa have these supercomputers right now. They have the needs. It is now possible for them to use these technologies, everything from genetic engineering technologies such as CRISPR to sensor-based technologies to artificial intelligence to solve the problems of the world. I mean, I spent some time with our principal scientific advisor, K. Raghavan, and the Prime Minister last year, arguing about why India should take the lead in curing cancer. Why? Because I believe that India can cure cancer. This is what's possible right now. So we can discuss this more, but the message here is that that India, Africa, and the rest of the world can now lead humanity in solving the grand challenges and in building new trillion-dollar industries. Back to you.
Thanks, Vivek. You've always been someone who's, brought challenging thoughts, disruptive thoughts, and I think the very basic fundamentals of what you talked about and I'm extremely proud of that industry that you referred to in India, to be a part of it, that we've created jointly together. And I think your suggestion on focusing on leveraging the tech to create a business and commercializing it is what creates the actual applications and what creates the opportunities for millions of people, both in India and Africa, in Asia and Africa. I'll go to the second part of the session, and I have to ask you, gentlemen, that we did start a little late. Is it okay if we run 5 more minutes more than what it is? And can I get a thumbs up if it is okay? And not more than that. So Rahul, just a quick question for you. You talked about iTech. You talked about the South-South cooperation and the engagement that has done across the region. Okay, I may have to request Vivek. You want to put your I don't know where it's from. Somewhere it's coming from. Rahul, the question for you is: how critical do you think is the role of science and tech in partnerships for developing countries in the new world order? In the sense, we are obviously, and maybe there is another world order that's going to happen because of the pandemic, but what do you think is the role of science and technology, and how do you, as a senior bureaucrat in the Ministry of External Affairs, see this as an opportunity for us to develop these two nations or these two regions, Asia and Africa?
Yeah, thanks, Jagdish. Really critical. I mean, we can see it. I'll give you 2 examples maybe, and that will make it evident. The first one is what we are planning, which is actually sort of rolled out already. It's called the E-Vidya Bharati program. I mean, it's science and technology being India's leading institutes of technology, tying up with African universities through satellite. And we are going to be giving 15,000 scholarships every year on this. And there's completely, I mean, science and technology based platform. So, and we've already got in the first few months over 18,000 students just from 15 countries that have just signed up the initial MOUs and all that. So that's going to build up, and it's Pan-Africa. And even in India, it's all over India, the institutes that are signing up. The other field there is education. There's going to be a similar link up with, it's called E-Arogya Bharati. So that's in medical. Actually, doctors and medical services, again from the best Indian institutes across to African hospitals, and the same satellite link. So that's science and technology at play. And then coming to a more direct, immediate, which we can all sort of follow and link up with, is what happened over the last few months because of this lockdown. Many of the normal iTech programs that I was mentioning, students from Africa couldn't come to India. And hence, we actually rolled out an e-iTech program. So it was all online, and we actually gave out a huge amount of information and data and all that on how to control this pandemic. So it was tailored to either the nursing staff or the doctors or hospital administrators. So there were multiple programs, and they really caught on in Africa. I mean, they were able to benefit from India's experience, the wealth of experience and knowledge. We just put it out there. And once they realized, I mean, this was e-iTech at work. And so this is showing how science and technology is going to increasingly be the driver. I mean, these are just 2 immediate examples that sort of come to mind.
Thanks.
Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Rahul. This is really encouraging to know that how the whole platform offered this, and really exciting to know that we and the people in Africa were able to collaborate and build something together. Lovely to know about the education program, the health program. There are some of those initiatives that absolutely are the need of the hour. Thank you very much. Dr. Mitra, coming to you, and you talked about the Sustainable Development Goals. You also talked about the humanitarian challenges of mankind. You talked about the key areas, basics like food, energy, water, air, and the basics that need to be provided to citizens of both these continents. How according to you can developing countries leverage this science and technology for the basics that we are talking about, right? And how can we also build a global alliance, if you may? I mean, we have a global alliance here, but we have a global alliance of countries that can come and leverage and lift up using science and technology these two continents. Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Jagdish. Well, I would go back to what both Vivek and earlier in your initial remarks, you talked about that, how do we leverage this research, development, and innovation that's happening in some of our countries. I think a very fundamental aspect here is what I say, we have to build the triad, connect together of what I call as education, which is knowledge sort of dissemination, research, which is knowledge creation, and innovation, which is knowledge application. And these three triad needs to be very closely connected along with the entire ecosystem coming together, which is the academia, R&D labs, and the enterprises that are present in the country. When I talk of enterprise industries, the startups, it's very critical that the investments that are being made by the country in fundamental and basic research, what I call leads to discovery science, and that discovery science needs to be connected with solution science. And I think the perspective which countries from Africa and Asia bring together is what I call affordable excellence. Now, how can we really leverage this in creating products which I say are inclusive, which are affordable and is also driven by the principles of equity? And this is a perspective which perhaps the West cannot give, because I always talk to my colleagues and friends in West. I always tell them that their products are very over-engineered. The same product, if we can cost optimize by reducing the input costs, and optimize its use in a more effective way, without, of course, compromising on quality, is what actually we must work together to deliver in order to meet the needs of the society. I still feel that, 90% of the products in the world are geared to meet the need of only 10% of the population. And that is where there is a huge gap, and I think this is where we need to work together to effectively leverage our complementary strengths. I always remember, this anecdote when India launched its satellite to Mars. It was the first country ever to have been able to do that in the very first attempt. And while congratulating our scientists, the Prime Minister said that the cost of this Mars mission is less than making the Hollywood movie Gravity. In other words, I have a different analogy. If you took a ride in a cab in Delhi, you would have perhaps paid 16 or 17 rupees a kilometer. In a three-wheeler, you would have paid maybe 7 or 8 rupees. If you took a ride on the satellite to Mars, you would have only paid 3 rupees a kilometer. And that is what India brings to the table. The ability to innovate in a way, in a cost-effective manner, where 1 + 1 translates to 11 and not to 2. And this is where we need to collaborate with each other. And I think there is a tremendous opportunity for India. And also the fact that over the years, we have seen a tremendous growth in the startup community in the country. And of course, I would credit the government of India having, over the last 10 years, in a very proactive way, supporting the entire ecosystem of startup. But healthy is initially, we started with mostly the softer part of services related to startup. But now we are in a deep tech startup. We are one of the countries, almost 25% of our startups are in the deep tech areas. So this therefore needs to be nurtured. And I think our startups are really smart. They are coming out with solutions which we saw in COVID were phenomenal. But what is very important here, I would like to stress, is how this can happen is through collaborations. Now, collaborations is the key. Collaborations at the subnational, national, and international level is a must. In India, when the COVID started, as all of you would know, we didn't have a PPE kit. We didn't have the ventilators. We didn't have the diagnostic kits. And India became, to a large extent, self-reliant within a few months. And how we did it? It is just because of the trust and confidence that we had. And all the entities rose up, whether it was an R&D lab or an academia and an IIT or an industry or a startup. They all came together, they leveraged their strength, provided their platforms, and together we made it. And I think this is what is required. No nation in the world, I dare say, can today stand up and say that I can solve the problem which the world is facing. The problems are manifesting every day. It is global in nature, and the only way ahead is through collaboration. So we have to create a win-win mechanism. Rahul has alluded to, we have a very strong collaboration with Africa, which I was privileged to nurture in partnership with FICCI, and support of MEA. Where we are looking at all the three strands of people, project, and innovation that should be supported across to enable this to happen. I think is very important. We need to also bring in the marginalized society. I always say the marginalized society are not marginal minds. They need to be brought up together and together in a holistic manner. We and these problems will not be solved or provided solutions by the West, by the way. They have their own local perspective. And this also needs a new ecosystem of what I call social innovation. These are not so easy because, it's what the Gandhian philosophy, which Dr. Mashelkar puts it, more from less for more, more from less for more. Right? So we have to have the optimal use of resources to provide the maximum good to maximum people. So this is a new concept, a concept that I think we as a developing countries can realize better than the developed world. And therefore, I see this is a common factor that will join us together to work in a collaborative manner where IP doesn't become an issue, but what is more important really to provide the needs of the impending needs of the society, which is very similar across in our continent. So there's a tremendous opportunity, I think, there to work together seamlessly. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. This is really an interesting quote and could not have been more applicable than our part of the world, or the topic that we are discussing today, which is more from less for more. And I think we would definitely need to sort of ingrain that in any of the discussions and the policy making that we do, and also involve the businesses to do that. I'm going to come to you, Vivek, for a couple of questions with you. You kind of alluded to it. You talked about it straight away from your beginning, saying, don't just ape the West because someone is telling you to invest more on R&D, but commercialize things. Look at how some of the companies like Apple and some of the companies like the Amazons of the world, or even our Indian IT services industry has done and scaled it up. But if I were to ask you a question, saying you obviously have the great connect between the Silicon Valley and having been part of some of the premium university and academic and research places in the US, many global entrepreneurs have come from those organizations or those universities, and there are folks that have created billion-dollar corporations or units out of those. How do you expect, or how do you vision or envision the entrepreneurial landscape to evolve across India and Africa, leveraging science and tech? What's your thought process there, Vivek?
Yeah, the West keeps telling India to invest more in basic R&D, 1 or 2% of GDP, whatever the numbers might be. What I would do instead is take all of that money and invest it in startups. India is doing a lot of good things. Niti Aayog in particular is incredible. I love the way the organization is thinking and how they're boosting entrepreneurship across the country. Invest more in that. Take that 1% of GDP, invest it on startups. And what you do is also connect them to the universities. The only two universities in America where the commercialization system works really well, Stanford and MIT. Why? Because they happen to be in the middle of tech centers. In academia, it's considered to be bad to be working with private industry. It's a taboo. And when professors work with private industry, they get blacklisted by their colleagues for selling out their technologies to private industry. This is what it's like in most universities, except at Stanford. At Stanford, professors on the boards of startups, they're actively interacting with venture capitalists. VCs and entrepreneurs actively come and roam the halls of Stanford University. You walk around, you meet the professors, you meet the researchers, and you share ideas with them. This is the model that India should emulate, that Africa should emulate. Don't go by what you're told. See what works the most effectively. It's that Stanford model of sharing ideas. So you let your universities do R&D. They should invest more in university R&D because some of the IITs and some of the other universities are doing some incredible research. Boost it. Give them more funding. Give them more support. But connect them with industry at the same time. So when you give them funding, you get perhaps FICCI to co-invest with you in this research. And then what you do is that you take the money you would have spent in basic research and you invest it in startups. Let there be 1,000 startups, let there be 100,000 startups, and let 90% of them fail. That's what happened in Silicon Valley also. The vast majority of startups fail. But what happens is that by failing, you learn, you grow, and then you keep doing it over and over again. So this is the model that India needs to employ. And, we've been talking about bringing Africa into it. Yes, absolutely. Africa has as many problems as India has. But bring the entrepreneurs together. Now we can collaborate. Before it used to be very hard without being in person. Now the fact that Rahul talked about teaching across across continents. This is so we can also now collaborate in startups across continents. Provide the seed funding for transcontinental startups. Come up with ideas such as that, and that's when we're going to start solving the grand problems and not only of India and Africa, but of humanity itself.
Thanks, Vivek. Absolutely relevant topics in terms of what to follow and what not to follow and not blindly follow is what probably your core message was, and what to pick up from those great institutions or great success stories that have emanated across the world and what is relevant for Asia and Africa. I think your message about, let there be 100,000 startups or sounds like those, let there be millions of flowers to bloom, and we probably allow.
One more thing, Desh Deshpande, who kicked off this conference, he has done more work to get the U.S. commercialization system working than anyone else. He spent a lot of time at MIT, getting them in. This is 20, 30 years ago, before it became normal. He spent a lot of time and effort getting them to commercialize their research. So he invested massively in it. He would go there personally and spend a lot of time in it. You should get him to teach India how to do it. That's the type of leadership you want. Don't listen to the scientists saying basic research and all this other nonsense. Listen to the people who've dealt with the problems with systems not working and have them show India how to innovate.
Absolutely. And I think allowing that to happen would then probably allow both these continents to solve some of the myriad of problems we have, including creating jobs and opportunities, because that will create out multiple thousands of this. We are really entering the final segment, gentlemen. As we come towards the closing, I don't think I would have wanted to close this, but I know you guys have work to do or business to conduct. And I would have loved to continue to hear you guys, but let's go towards the closing remarks before we close it out. Rahul, I'll start with you, as considering that this panel was to look at the objectives of how to drive the leveraging of science and technology to deliver growth and equitable growth across these two continents. What would be your closing remarks? What would you want the business to do, academia to do, and what do you think the policymakers do to make this work?
We fully respect, Africa is pursuing a sort of African-owned and African-led development. So that model, I mean, India's endeavor has been to sort of base our partnership on the principles of equality, mutual respect, solidarity, and mutual benefit. So our model of cooperation with Africa, I mean, this Afro-Asian century that we're talking about, is demand-driven, consultative, participative, involves local resources, it builds capacity, and based on Africa's own prioritization of its needs. So the challenge is really to liberate the potential of Africa, which is the touchstone of development. So that's the model that India is following. So our entire international partnerships actually that Aravinda mentioned about over the last 7 decades, it's prompted by economic impulse, of course, but as much by there are moral principles and emotional bonds. So we don't forget that. I mean, the Africa, as we say, the Indian Ocean, it separates us, but it also unites us. So it is the sort of the monsoon winds that brought the boats across on both sides every time. So in that case, the way we are following the Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas sort of Vikas, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas model, diplomacy for development, we have expanded the reach. It's now a much more geographical reach, the much bigger sectoral coverage of it. But the most important point is that it's universally recognized international norms that we follow, good governance, openness, financial viability, and transparency, most important. And this, I think, holds good across for everyone, whether it's industry, academia, or government, internationally. Thank you.
Thanks, Rahul. Dr. Mitra, your closing remarks on the same topic, please, as to what would you expect policymakers, academicians, business to do and imbibe the more of the R&D and the science part of it as part of driving business growth and enabling these two continents.
Yeah, thank you, Jagdish. I think what's important, again, I would allude to the bottom line. What I talked about is collaboration and cooperation. I think we must look at our problems in a more consortia approach, and this is what Vivek said. Otherwise, if we leave it just to academia alone, it becomes an academic pursuit that leads to new knowledge generation through publication of papers and all, which is very, very important. But at the same time, it's end use by application to provide real world solution is what is required. And therefore, and this can only happen when there is a seamless connectivity, a complete trust and confidence in working together to provide solutions. I would just quote some 2 or 3 very powerful dimensions of how science, technology, innovation has empowered India through this whole process of connecting. Under the Digital India mission, the direct benefit transfer, covering 357 million marginalized people, have happened through technology convergence, and it was in a very layman's way, it was just a joining of the Aadhaar, the mobile phone, and the Jan Dhan, account, the JAM as we call it, on a common platform that has enabled 357 million people through the direct benefit scheme that has touched the lives of people, provided them an assured social security. So these are some very powerful tools that we can actually extend across in the developing world to make sure that that the citizenry actually gets what it is supposed to get from the government. A very important initiative now that we are taking, as you have heard about, is the National Digital Health Portal. This is again a very powerful mission. Actually, the vision is to integrate promotive, preventive, and curative healthcare technologies that will enable the last mile delivery of healthcare needs, both in the rural and the semi-rural or peri-urban areas. And this is going to bring a transformative change as far as access to health is concerned. Similarly, we are building the agri data stack. Now, this is nothing but actually all the knowledge that has been created through our own data collection processes with a back-end data analytics there, providing a set of information to the farmer that the farmer can use in order to increase soil productivity and at the end sustainability and the income. So effectively what we are doing is trying to see how the know-how can be connected with the show-how by the knowledge that we have. And these are all open platforms where startups, industries can all plug together. The common service centers that we have set up across the country, 350,000 common service centers. These are nothing but digital kiosks where innovators can come, plug in and provide solutions of that can address agriculture, health, water needs of a village and a community. So these are some very powerful platforms. And the last mission that I would like to talk about is the artificial intelligence mission. You know, the cyber physical world everybody is talking about. And I must tell one very important thing, that India's own brand of AI roadmap has the tagline AI for all. Mind it, artificial intelligence for all. It implies technology leadership in AI to ensure socio-economic development and inclusive growth of the country by focusing on core sectors like healthcare, agriculture, education, public mobility, clean energy. So this system is therefore very unique. It is actually guided by optimization of social goods rather than maximizing of top-line growth, thereby ensuring job creation and not job deprivation. And this underpinning message of the policy paper, which echoes this government vision, as Rahul alluded to, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, is actually enabled by cutting-edge scientific and technological inputs. And this is what we need, these type of models which touches the lives of the people using science and technology, enabled to deliver goods for their benefit, is something that we need to work together as the only solution for the future, especially after the pandemic. It's important.
Thank you, Dr. Reddy. We were finally coming to you, and you talked about the business.
Rahul, you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry, if I may, Bipan. Aravinda mentioned some very important points, which I just want to supplement by saying that we are looking at taking these models into Africa. Many of the ones that he mentioned about the Jandan and the others, the health model. So all that we are looking at how we can replicate it and take it out to Africa.
Absolutely. And Rahul, I think that would be an amazing sign of cooperation, an amazing sign of economic development, leveraging each other, where digital really enables the cooperation and the power of the intellect rather than simple funds to be able to support it. So I think we are really harnessing the power that we've developed here, what we could take there, and it's homegrown. So we are absolutely proud of what we've been able to achieve there. Vivek, coming to you finally as we close out this session, really wanted to hear your views. You talked about quite a few things from your starting remarks of the challenges and that these parts of the world face are quite unique. The opportunities are also quite unique. You talked about the scale at which some of the things can be done here. But going forward, what would be a recommendation? What would be a guidance to businesses and to the policymakers in order to make this come to life?
Yeah, Jagdish, the first lesson and the most important lesson is get over your inferiority complex. India and Africa have something in common, that they were both colonized. They were both made to feel inferior. They were both made to feel like they were substandard and they should be left behind. And now they're being lectured at, saying, you're not like us, therefore you're inferior. Get over it. You know, the fact is that Africa was the cradle of civilization itself. India was a cradle of science. A lot of, we talk about semiconductors coming from the West, but the core technologies that took us to the moon and to the Mars came from India. The mathematics, the science, they were all founded in India. So India was a cradle of basic research. It invented all of the concepts that allowed, us to build these semiconductors and build these core technologies. So now what's happened is that everything has come full circle. Technology has democratized. Because technology is advancing exponentially, they've gotten faster, cheaper, they're affordable, they're available everywhere. You now have literally a couple of billion people who understand the problems, who have needs, who are now empowered, enabled to come together to solve the problems of the world. The West will not solve the problems of humanity because it doesn't understand them. Where I live in Silicon Valley, it's amazing. I mean, we have it's beautiful scenery, beautiful everything, no problems here. we have great hospitals. We don't understand the problems of the world. So Silicon Valley is not going to solve the problems of India or Africa. And neither is Europe, because they don't understand it. They don't feel the pain. So what has to now happen is that because technology is democratized, the nations of the world have to come together and bring and this is not nations. I mean, Rahul and Arvinda might want to do good things, but all they can do is bring some labs together. It's the people, it's the entrepreneurs who have to come together to solve the problems. They have to learn from each other. There are some incredible innovations coming out of Africa. They should be brought over to India. And this is what Rahul or Binda can do, is to make those innovations available, connect the entrepreneurs together. But it's the entrepreneurs, the scientists, even the academics have to come together to solve the grand challenges of humanity, because it is possible to solve them. It is possible now to uplift them and to remove poverty, hunger, disease, and to take us into the amazing future that we should be in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sorry, Arvinda, were you saying something? Okay. No, so absolutely, Vivek. I think this is a great sort of comment on which we should probably conclude today's session. I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think you talked about multiple things, and that I'm going to probably remember, and I'm sure the audience will remember. All of you guys mentioned a few comments that I think will remain for us. Rahul, you talked about the way to probably bring new technologies and new businesses that succeed or new social businesses that have succeeded based on science and technology here, and being able to take them out to other markets. And Vivek connected the dot at the end of it by talking about stuff that's happening in Africa, and that can be probably brought to India for the same good purpose. So that, and I think Aurobindo has always highlighted in twice or thrice in his conversations the importance of collaboration and cooperation. So I think what I really take away from this conversation is that it lies here. It lies right within our realms between Asia and Africa, between India and the African nations, to be able to bring the best of science and technology that is needed for these markets. As Vivek said, sitting in the Silicon Valley or driving through one of the 101s, you can't tell what the challenges of a road in some part of Maharashtra or Madhya Pradesh has, or villages have, or similarly someplace in Ghana has. Therefore, the people here have to take ownership of making that solution happen. And I think in internet democratization of AI, and like you said, Dr. Mitra, AI for all, is where the answers lie within here. And with that, I'm going to thank you, gentlemen, for a session that really, like they say in science and technology and innovation, put many light bulbs in our heads to burn. It's got nothing to do with the light shining from my head, I hope. But it's probably got more to do with the comments that you guys made. So thank you again. Thank you on behalf of Vicky, and thank you on behalf of DST for an amazing session.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
Take care, everyone.
Everyone.